Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Got a loaded show today. I'm talking topics. We got Brian, we got Vince. I'm in here as well. This is going to be a really fun show today. We're talking about the offensive position battles that Notre Dame is going to be having in fall camp, talking about the changes that we want to see on Notre Dame's offense from a personnel standpoint to a schematic standpoint. We're going to cover all that. We are wrapping up today's show with a daily mailbag geared towards the topics that we're talking about today. But before we get there, there is a topic that we felt like we absolutely had to address. Brian Kelly was recently on a Notre Dame podcast and was addressing a lot of different things, and figured now would be a better time than any to start talking about how that all unfolded.
Trev, I really went into the day intent on I'm not gonna watch. I told people I wasn't gonna watch. I said on the board I'm not gonna watch that mess. And just so we're clear, when I say mess, when I say how it's BS, I have no problem with the guys that interviewed Brian Kelly. Like, people get to run their podcast however they want. I mean, y'all know I wouldn't do it because of how I feel about the man. But obviously my relationship was different than theirs, and that's okay. So there's no criticism going to be offered here of, like, I wouldn't have done it. But, look, they want to have them on. Awesome. Great. That's fine. Do your show the way you want to do your show. That's what I love about this, is everybody can run their shows however they want to run their shows. We do it our way because that's what we're good at. They do it their way because that's what they're good at. So none of this, and I don't want it in the chat of people taking shots at the question askers. I want to focus on what was said by Brian Kelly. And I just want to get that out of the way right now. I did end up giving in and watching parts of it. Trev transcribed it, so I was able to kind of go to different parts of the show and listen to his comments about Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman and all that. And we definitely have some things to say, because at the end of the day, fellas, this is nothing more than Brian Kelly looking to whitewash his career, use his political background to put out just PR slop, as Trevor said in a text message to me. That's exactly what it was, in an attempt to rehabilitate his career, because as he said in the thing, he wants to coach again. And the comments made about him coming out of LSU and coming out of Notre Dame have certainly done damage to him, in my opinion, and his reputation as a coach. And he's basically trying to rehabilitate that, because that's what Brian Kelly's always done. He did this at Notre Dame. He constantly spun things, about how bad this was and how great he was and how he was winning in spite of things. And it's the same BS that we've heard over and over and over again when it comes to Brian Kelly. It's never about him. And he, even when he takes blame, it's like kind of half-hearted blame. It's like, I kind of have to say it's my fault, but
or gives a compliment. Or gives a compliment. It's like, they're doing it, but it's always a but.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do a good enough job hiring coordinators, but if I would have been able to have Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman with me, I'm sorry, your offense was not a problem for the first 2 years of your career, as you were setting, program records and had a Heisman winner. So we really want to make it seem like it, So we have a lot to say, and we're going to give you quotes. We're going to give you things that he said, because I don't want anyone to think we're mischaracterizing what Brian Kelly said, which we never have done. We're going to have some comments to have about that. So Travis is going to lead us down some of the different comments, and Vince wasn't initially going to be on the show today, but he's like, you sure you want to miss this one, Vince?
Yeah, this part for sure. I'm here for it.
Yeah. But before we begin, Vince wasn't going to be on the show today because, he's still battling back from some health issues. And so he's sucking things up a little bit today to be with us, which we appreciate. And we're still praying for you, brother.
Yeah, man.
So, but yeah, let's get started, fellas. And Trev, we'll go down. We talked about the different things that we want to talk about. You lead us through the different comments and quotes, and we'll have some fun with it.
Let's address the elephant in the room, gentlemen. There was a lot of comments around Brian Kelly and his thoughts and the departure that he had from Notre Dame. And one of the very first things that he looked to do in this interview was to course correct and try to, right the ship, you could say, as to what the true meaning of his departure was at Notre Dame. And that's where I think it started to get a little bit interesting with this. It's the actual quote was, quote, "Well, I think I was mischaracterized only in the sense that I didn't leave Notre Dame because they couldn't win a national championship. Those words never came out of my mouth. What I said is, if I'm going to leave, I'm going to go to a place that can win a national championship." And that was perceived as being, he doesn't think he can win one here. So that's where we start this conversation.
So just so we're clear, for one, No, he never said I can't win a championship at Notre Dame. But do you know what he also never said? He never said what he said he said. That's the other thing that he's just not being truthful about, is he never said if I'm going to leave. So if you want us to hold you to what you actually said, that's fine. But then say what you actually said, because he did not say. He can say, well, what I meant was, he can say that, and that's fine. But he didn't say what I meant was. He said what I said was if I was going to leave. No, he didn't. That's not what he said. And you know, like, look, here's exactly what he said. I'm going to read the quote because I wrote this article at the time. There's a reason that I took it the way I took it. There's a reason that his former players took it the way that he took it. There's a reason former captains of his took it the way that we all took it, because that's what he said. And so when Brian Kelly let me just find the direct quote from Brian Kelly that he said in this. I have multiple shows where Brian Kelly basically lied about stuff. This is exactly what he said. Direct quote. It's talking about being at LSU. He said, it's been awesome because you've got incredible facilities. You've got players that want to be great. I want to be in an environment where I have the resources to win a national championship. I felt like I did everything that I could at Notre Dame, and they felt like they did everything they could for me. Then later in the show, he talks about everything that Notre Dame was lacking, once again making it very clear that you didn't think Notre Dame had, as an institution, the resources needed to win at Notre Dame. So even in this interview, he undermines his whole mischaracterization thing, and this is where his political background comes into play, because he's not lying. He didn't say, I want this at LSU because I didn't have that at Notre Dame. He never said that. He also never said, well, we had all that at Notre Dame, but if I'm going to leave because I've done everything I can at Notre Dame, which actually would be a fair thing to say. I mean, you can get to a point where you're like, look, I've done everything I can here. You know, I've taken them as far as I can take them. I just don't know if I'm the guy to lead them over the top. That's fine. That's fair if that's what he would have said. But he said that while then, and even today says that while taking shots at Notre Dame. You know, or justifying it or making excuses. Well, we had wooden bleachers. I'm sorry. Are wooden bleachers why you got beat at home by South Florida? Are wooden bleachers, is that why in year 4 of your tenure, you decided to, let's go with a jet sweep to Chris Brown, who's literally never carried a ball on a jet sweep inside the 5-yard line against Northwestern? I mean, is that the reason that you made all the coaching mistakes that you made as a coach, because you had wooden bleachers, because you didn't have a chef? You know, like, are there things that Notre Dame was behind on? Yeah. And if I said no, if I'd have said Notre Dame had everything he needed to win or to make winning easy, I'd be lying, because you could go back and find articles I wrote where I criticized Notre Dame for not putting more into the nutrition program and different things like that. But I would also like to remind people that it wasn't Notre Dame that forced him to keep Phil Longo years beyond when he was good enough to get the job done. It's not Notre Dame's fault that he had players that were getting gym memberships to local gyms because they couldn't go into the gym at Notre Dame and work out. I just want to remind people of that. And that was in years 6 and 7, not in years 1, 2, and 3. And so this notion that he was mischaracterized, no, you weren't mischaracterized. You were not mischaracterized at all, because he was genuinely mischaracterized. He would have corrected the record at the time. The fact of the matter is, he made it very clear. And Brian Kelly is a smart guy and knows how to say things that are pure spin. And again, did he lie in his comments on the podcast today? No, he didn't, because he never said what he said people said he said. But we also have brains. We're also, contrary to Brian Kelly's opinion, we're all not dumber than him. He's not the smartest guy in the room. We all do understand what he was saying. He was very clearly saying, I wanted to go somewhere that had players that wanted to compete for championships. I wanted to go somewhere that had the resources to compete for championships, because I didn't have that at Notre Dame. And if you think I'm mischaracterizing him still because I dislike him, he made those same comments in the show today, which the guys Trevor will read that in a little bit. So the fact of the matter is, Trevor, is we didn't mischaracterize a thing. You went to LSU because you were mad that Notre Dame wasn't going to give you more money. And he says, well, you know, they had their own timeline on doing these certain things. Well, maybe maybe, and this is coming from, people that I know that give money to the program, maybe people that have money were tired of giving money to a program whose head coach would disappear for months at a time. Maybe these smart businessmen realized that continuing to give money to your program was a waste of their resources because they no longer believed that you were going to put in the work to be a championship coach. Maybe that's why Notre Dame wasn't willing to give you more money. Maybe that's why they weren't willing to give you the things that you said you needed, because you had an indoor facility and still went out and got beat by Cincinnati at home in 2021 with this brand new state-of-the-art indoor facility and four total practice fields. So this notion that, I never said that. I felt like I took Notre Dame as far as I could take them. And if I was going to leave it, if that's what he wanted to say, that's exactly what he would have said at the time. But he didn't. He was trying to, number one, whitewash his own Notre Dame career. And number two, he was trying to gain some advantages of, hey, look, come to LSU. Hey, look, recruits, look, we have all these things. Notre Dame doesn't. That's what he was trying to do. There was no, hey, man, I loved it at Notre Dame. We had taken Notre Dame as far as we could take them, and it just was time. If he wanted to say that, he would have said that. If he believed that, he would have said that at the time to ensure. And everything he said in this entire interview about Notre Dame further justifies that we didn't mischaracterize a freaking thing. That we saw you for who you are, always. Because someone who believed that Notre Dame had all the resources to win would have not spent so much of his final years telling everyone how you had to shop down a different aisle, talking about, giving Joel Klatt and Gus Johnson your little program talking points as we're watching Notre Dame play Wisconsin in 2021 about, they just don't have this and don't have that, and this is the best coaching job that Brian Kelly has done, blah, blah. Who do you think told them that? It was him and his sycophants. That's who it was. You were even talking down your own freaking program in year 11 of your last year and making it all about you. And that's exactly what he did in this interview. It was all about him. It was all about him basically trying to lie and spin and try to tell people, hey, we did this. And there just was so much that bothered me in this interview. And I, like I said, I wasn't going to watch it initially. I was like, you know what, man, just forget this. I'm ready to put Brian Kelly behind us. But he's the one that keeps making himself a topic of conversation. So if he wants to try to, revamp his career so he can have another chance to coach young men, I'm going to remind people why he doesn't deserve that opportunity, because he doesn't care about developing young people. He didn't care about developing young people at this end of his career at Notre Dame. And you know who told me that? You know where I heard that from? About 60 of his former players and parents of his former players, including many captains. You guys know the people that I talk to. I tell you guys where these sources are coming from. This isn't like, well, that one fourth stringer who didn't like. No, because you know what? You could find fourth stringers that I coach. I'm like, man, that guy didn't know what he's talking about, because they're probably still mad that I didn't play. That's why when a captain tells me this, it means something to me. There's a reason why former players came back in droves after Brian Kelly left. There's a reason that they kept their mouths shut and that they stayed away from the program until the minute Marcus Freeman came back. And you know why? Because one guy always looked at Notre Dame as the stumbling block. They were always lucky to have him. Biggest difference between Marcus Freeman and Brian Kelly as far as how they view Notre Dame is that right there. Marcus Freeman looks at Notre Dame as a tremendous opportunity, a place he can succeed, and has never blamed Notre Dame for why they've fallen short of winning a championship. That's all Brian Kelly did, was make excuses. And he's doing it again in this interview. He's once again making excuses for why he didn't win at Notre Dame. Nothing about Notre Dame is why you refused to recruit Jalen McMillan when you were on the verge of flipping a big-time receiver. And nothing about Notre Dame is why you told your offensive coordinator, we shouldn't have to beg a kid to come here. None of that is Notre Dame's fault. And this notion that, Notre Dame has changed all these things, nonsense. Notre Dame has adapted to the modern landscape. Of course they have. This notion that, they do NIL now and they do, they now accept, guys who reclassify. None of that was even a concern under Brian Kelly, because kids weren't really reclassifying at that time. So none of that was even relevant to why Brian Kelly failed. Brian Kelly didn't do the work, and that's why Brian Kelly failed. Brian Kelly wanted to lower the standard so he could kind of do things his way. And so that way, when they surpassed this lowered standard, he could say, look at the great job I did. Look how many times we won 10 games in years where the only ranked team we beat was Navy. I mean, what a wonderful job we did winning 10 games against this tough schedule. Lost to every good team that we played. What a wonderful job we did. Notre Dame is such a better program than Cincinnati, even though Cincinnati kicked my butt in year 11 on our home field. What excuses do you have for getting crushed by Cincinnati? Okay, get it. Bama, you weren't on the same level. Resources this, resources that, shopping. You weren't even shopping down Cincinnati's aisle? Really? I mean, is that what we're to believe? I'm just saying. So this is nothing more than a spin attempt by Brian Kelly to pretend like he didn't say what he said. And once again, try to remind everyone that I have done such a great job at Notre Dame. And now they're giving Marcus Freeman all the things that I never had. And that's why he's winning. And we'll have some comments about what he said about Marcus Freeman here in a little bit because, yeah. Anyway, let me hear your thoughts, guys. Because if y'all don't interject, you're not going to get a word in today because I'm just going to keep going off. So I'll try my best to take a breath and let you guys have some comments.
No, you're all good, brother. We get it. We get it completely. Vince, one of the things I wanted to get your thoughts on was Brian Kelly's kind of laundry list of excuses as to why there was no success in South Bend. In the interview, he said, quote, "We really had one job, a singular job, and that was to bring Notre Dame football back to being relevant. But part of that was there was an infrastructure issue. We had wooden bleachers. We had no scoreboard. We didn't have a practice, an indoor facility. So there was a lot of lifting and digging that had to go on outside of also winning football games." When you hear that and when you start thinking about, because to Brian's point at the beginning, there was no overarching big picture lie. When Brian Kelly took over in 2010, they didn't have some of those things, and there were wooden bleachers in the stadium.
Still are.
But when you think about why that was the reason they didn't have success, where does that kind of get you to?
Well, again, it's the excuse making that Brian was just talking about. Is he lying about the fact that those things are accurate? Well, first of all, number one, they had a scoreboard. They've had a scoreboard in that stadium ever since it opened in 19 whatever it was.
Yeah.
When Newt Rockne was patrolling the sidelines, they've always had a scoreboard.
Jumbotron.
Right. I know. And look, you don't need a Jumbotron to be successful on the field. Number one, does it enhance the experience for the fans? Sure, it does. Did you get artificial turf eventually because you needed it to perform better on the field? Yes, you did. Right? He's the one that brought artificial turf to the dismay of many people, and I get that.
Well, I mean, Jack Swarbrick did, by the way. I mean, just so we're clear. I mean, I'm sure Brian Kelly wanted it, but Jack Swarbrick's the one that did raised the funding for it.
But what I'm saying is, was he receiving what would make him better on the field? Wooden bleachers does not make you better on the field or worse on the field. Not having a Jumbotron does not make you worse on the field. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are...
I can attest as someone who covered recruiting at Notre Dame for Brian Kelly's entire tenure that not once did a recruit ever tell me that he didn't come to Notre Dame because he had wooden bleachers or a scoreboard.
This is what I'm saying. 100%. And the whole chef thing blows my mind too, because they do have a dedicated football chef, and they've had it for at least a decade because I know the guy. Okay.
They just didn't make the food on the facility.
He wasn't housed in the Goog. But, I mean, look, it's getting shipped from across campus. Okay, I get it. And you've got to repurpose, the players' lounge to have people eat while you're in the Goog. Okay, like, again, you had it, but you didn't have it. And so he's going to highlight the didn't have it, right? I mean, and that's the thing. The guy, the video that they just put out of the one chef, like, preparing stuff, that man has been the football chef for a decade. That man specifically. Okay, and he's a really good guy, and he really knows his stuff.
Oh, that's good to know. That guy, that's not some new guy.
No,
he's just cooking in a different building on campus.
I have personally worked with him through the Gatorade program, and I've been doing that for almost 20 years. And he's been the guy. Like, he has been the guy. Okay, so that's ridiculous, and the whole chef thing, I always found that to be very funny because he's always been the football chef. Anyway, so the excuse is, did you not have those things? Yeah, you didn't have those things, but you did have an indoor facility.
Mm-hmm.
You had one.
It was an older one, but
okay,
yes, you had one.
But Brian, does
100-yard field?
Does it have a football field on it?
Yeah, 100-yard field.
Can you?
The only person who it affected was Tyler Newsome, and the Pirates. That's the only person who exactly
because there's the roof is really low. Like okay, but you know what? Tyler Newsome ended up being a pretty good punter for Notre Dame. So okay, but they had an indoor facility, and it's the same one that was there when Lou Holtz was there. Like, you know, come on, guys, like that. So did they get a new one while Brian Kelly was the head coach? Yes, they got a new one that's so much nicer and so much shinier and so much newer.
And guess what? Nothing changed.
Right. That's exactly right.
Still lost to every good team that he played.
Correct.
In the 2 years they had the indoor facility.
Correct. Now, is there an arms race in college football and all of those different things, and you want shiny and new, and is the Shields building going to be amazing? Yeah, all of those things are true. But what he's complaining about, I'm sorry, had nothing to do with the product on the field. It had nothing to do with him choosing to go play golf instead of recruit. But he doesn't bring that up. You know what I mean? Like, what made him not as successful as Notre Dame fans wanted him to be is because of who Brian Kelly was, not because of what Notre Dame wasn't giving him.
None of those things that caused him to fail had anything to do with Notre Dame.
Correct. 100%.
Nothing. Lou Holtz won a championship with an administration that basically fought him
tooth and nail on everything.
Constantly.
And they had the worst facilities. Like their locker room was in the Joyce Center. And, you know, they had to walk all the way to their practice field and all, you know, they have terrible facilities, right?
I mean, they had terrible facilities when Charlie Weiss was landing a bunch of 5 stars at Notre Dame as well.
100%.
They had wooden bleachers when Charlie Weiss had back-to-back 5-star quarterbacks commit.
And they still
they had wooden bleachers and no scoreboard when Marcus Freeman was getting Golden Tate and Michael Floyd and Kyle Rudolph and Manti Te'o and Zach Martin and Tyler Eifert and all those studs that Brian Kelly won with to come to Notre Dame.
Right.
Like
now
this is the thing, Vince. The notion that Brian Kelly inherited a bad situation is true if we're only talking about the infrastructure that surrounds the football program.
Correct.
The notion that Brian Kelly inherited a bad roster is an absolute lie, because there were multiple guys that should be college football Hall of Famers when it's all said and done, and a couple guys that weren't college football Hall of Famers but will likely be NFL Hall of Famers that he walked in the door with already on his team.
Yep.
That Charlie Weiss recruited. Manti, Zach Martin, Michael Floyd, Tyler Eifert, Lewis Nix was hired when they didn't even have a head coach. Harrison Smith. You know, I mean, we could go on and on and on of the players that walked in the door. He walked in the door and they were sitting there in the locker room.
Correct.
So this notion that you know, he inherited this bad roster, I'll contend this, and we can have this debate all day. He actually inherited a better roster than what Marcus Freeman inherited. Marcus Freeman inherited better facilities. But you know, part of the reason why Notre Dame is getting so much NIL money, you know, part of the reason that they're willing to do whatever they need to do to pay for these things, I'll tell you why. Because I talked to the donors who are giving money, and I talked to people that are raising money for it. Because those people that are giving that money believe in Marcus Freeman. They did not like nor believe in Brian Kelly.
Because he didn't believe in them.
No,
because he didn't want anybody around.
Constantly talking down Notre Dame.
Yes,
constantly talking down Notre Dame.
Wouldn't have former players around. Wouldn't invest in what is Notre Dame. Brian Kelly never understood overall what Notre Dame was about. He never did. He did. He just didn't like it. Okay, that's fair.
Because the tradition and the players took shine away from him. If he embraced Notre Dame and its past and its history the way that Marcus Freeman did, then he doesn't get all the credit for the job he did.
Right. Just the fact that he did not embrace what Notre Dame is, and Marcus Freeman has done the exact opposite, is the difference here. That's the difference. And we knew in day one, I'll just say this. I knew in day one, you know, I attended the opening press conference for Marcus Freeman when he got the job that was inside the IAC, the indoor facility. You know, asked him a question, all these things. The second he got done with that press conference, he got on a plane and he started recruiting. That moment forward, it was like, okay, this is going to be different.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, this is going to be different because that is not what occurred under Brian Kelly. And that has nothing to do with where you practice. It doesn't have anything to do with the bleachers. It doesn't have anything to do with the Jumbotron. It doesn't have anything to do with any of that. It has to do with he would have jumped on an Allegiant Air, plane if necessary to go visit those recruits and get in front of those people. That's what he would have done. Yes, he had a private jet, but guess what? So did Brian Kelly. So that's when you knew things were going to be different. It's the work ethic. It's the embracing of Notre Dame and all the people around it and what makes Notre Dame special. And it's why we're all fans of Notre Dame, is what makes Notre Dame special. He never embraced it. Marcus Freeman has done the opposite, and he can just lay back and all the money that is coming in because they respect what he's doing and they respect his relationship with the players, former and future and current, and they believe that that is what is going to take Notre Dame to the next level. And so he's got everything that he needs. He flat out said it the other day in an interview. He's like, when they're asking him about when he was with Hayward, right? And they asked him, hey, is it going to be a money thing that gets you to the NFL? What does the NFL have to do? He's like, guys, they're taking care of me. That's never going to be an issue.
Agreed 100%. Well, let's talk about.
If you're going to move on, I wanted to say one thing real quick on this. I don't want to pretend and do what Brian Kelly's doing and change the real history of Notre Dame. In that, I'm not going to sit here and say that Brian Kelly had the same level of financial support and institutional support during his tenure that Marcus Freeman has now. I don't want to pretend to do that. My point, because he didn't. And there's reasons why. Part of the reasons why were him. So I want to make sure I'm very clear when I say this. A big reason why we see an enhanced level of support is Marcus Freeman. The other part is there is new leadership at Notre Dame. But this notion that what they were lacking was somehow the reason why he lost. The wooden bleachers were gone by what, 2015? The scoreboard was built in what, 2015, 2016? Like when was the Crossroads project done? Because the fact of the matter is he had better recruiting classes at Notre Dame before all the new stuff came. His two best recruiting classes were 2011 and 2013. He recruited worse after all the new stuff was built.
His 4-8 season didn't come till after all the new stuff was built.
So this notion that that's why they couldn't recruit at Notre Dame is
This fall of 2017 was the first official
season. That's right. So they started because they were doing construction in 2015.
Yeah.
That I remember.
Yep.
Because I remember the construction was kind of funneling sound into the stadium. I remember us talking about how much louder it was that year. So you know how many times we've heard kids talk about, I love what Notre Dame is doing because of the layout of the facilities. Well, that's exactly what they were doing with the Crossroads project. Recruits were excited. The reason I'm thinking 2014, 2015 is because that's when we first started hearing recruits get excited about what they were doing.
Oh, yeah.
So again, none of those things had anything to do with why Brian Kelly's best recruiting classes were when they had no scoreboard and wooden bleachers.
I can't even believe he brought that up. That just blows my mind. Bleachers.
Yeah.
Really
they signed more big-time players before all of that stuff than afterwards. And look, we've seen a lot of this, guys. I was told to my face by a team captain, he would bring us back in January when we'd get back from winter break, and then we would barely see him until right before spring practice started. And Michael Mayer, somebody reminded me of this. Michael Mayer said in a podcast that Kelly was never around.
Yeah.
And that's what he liked about playing for Marcus Freeman in his 1 year playing for Freeman, is because Freeman was always around.
He's in the weight room. He's always around. And we were also told that you had to make an appointment to see the head coach prior to Marcus
Now, to
Freeman.
a degree, sometimes you still have to do that.
But
that was always how it was.
Yeah.
There's times you're going to go to Marcus Freeman's office and he's not there because he's doing this or doing that. That's not the point. Like we're being honest about it. I mean, to Vince's point, I mean, I'm not trying to correct Vince. I'm saying like it's different. Sometimes you've got to do that now because you're not sure if he's going to be around or not. But back then it was your only way to get access to the head football coach.
That's the point.
If you were a player at Notre Dame.
Right.
And that's why it's one of these things where it's like, okay, sure, you didn't have this, you didn't have that, but those are not the reasons you lost. That's not why you lost to South Florida. That's not why you lost to Northwestern. That's not why and of course, there's the whole, well, Freeman had a rough start, and Kelly said, so did I. I was glad he said that, because it's like, let's not try to pretend like Marcus Freeman's first couple seasons were any different than Brian Kelly's first couple seasons. The difference is that in year 4, after his run to the title game in year 4, Marcus Freeman's team was still really freaking good, and Brian Kelly's was not. Do you know why? Because that's when all the Charlie Weiss recruits were gone. That next year. That's when all Eifert, Manti, all of them after 11 and 12, all those players were gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what changed.
Let's talk about the now. Let's talk about Notre Dame head coach Marcus Freeman. And some of the unfortunate piece around some of Kelly's comments coming out now is because of where Notre Dame is at as a football program. Mm-hmm. They're coming off of a 10-win season. They were in the college football playoff 2 years ago. They are one of the favorites on FanDuel to win the national title this upcoming season. And so when you start thinking about some of the comments that were made this afternoon or earlier this morning about Marcus Freeman, that's when things start to get real interesting. And it's a very loaded one. So he was asked why he thinks Freeman has grown into being a great head coach. And he started off by saying, quote, "I will say this, it's extraordinary that a football coach with no head coaching experience has been able to step into the job and do as well as Marcus had. It needs to be said. I had 19 years of being a head coach, and I felt like the water was up to my nose at times at Notre Dame. So I have much respect for Marcus and what he's been able to do in that role." Very shortly after, he went on to say, what Marcus does extremely well is he listens. He doesn't have a preordained, this is the way we're doing it. He'll get there, but he listens. And he listens to people around him, people that he respects. And because he does that and he's humble, he's able to move with the job as the job comes more difficult at times or ever changing. And that's a great quality that he had. And I saw that as a defensive coordinator.
So, first of all, oh, man. So I just want a couple things to point out about how it's almost like he didn't say this. This is me reading to his comments, that he was kind of like, well, yeah, it's a little easier for Marcus. This wasn't part of that response. It was like, my job was to, bring back to Notre Dame being relevant. And then he talked about they now realize the importance of a nutrition program. They needed to address that. It wasn't in the cards, wasn't in their timetable, got caught neutral a little bit. Then why did they immediately change that when Marcus Freeman got hired? Why? Because it's not like they were shocked that you left. I've talked to people that knew mid-season 2021 that Brian Kelly was going to be gone. And you know why they knew that? Because they knew Jack said enough is enough. You just got a freaking contract a year ago. Stop making excuses and go win. And they knew he was going to leave. So it was in the cards for Notre Dame to make those changes. That's just a flat out lie, which is why they did it immediately when Marcus Freeman was hired. To his comments, this was the most backhanded compliment I've seen in a long time of someone saying something about another head coach. And I thought I had such hope. I'm like, you know what? He's going to take the classy high road here, because he talked about, he goes, it needs to be said that someone with no experience was able to do what he's done. And I was like, he's spot on. That was the big question that even the most ardent Marcus Freeman supporters had about him. Like, look, I think he's good at this. I think he's done all these wonderful things as a defensive coordinator. How's he going to handle being a head coach? Because it hasn't gone very well so far for guys who showed up at Notre Dame without head coaching experience. There were guys with head coaching experience that didn't do very well. And so then he says the best thing about Marcus Freeman is that he listens. He doesn't have preordained, this is the way we're doing it. He'll get there. So, and then he says he listens to people he respects, which he does. And that's maybe a lesson that Brian Kelly should apply. Maybe actually listen to the people that you respect and change your character and how you go about your job. Because I know for a fact you ignored things that people that respect you and tried to say, coach, man, we got to do it different. And then you'd end up forcing those people out or basically undercutting them and maybe, saying, hey, we're going to make you co-coordinator, even though you just led us to our best offensive season in school history twice. Maybe those are the things. But what he's saying here, and again, I'm not, just so he doesn't think I'm mischaracterizing his comments, I'm not saying this is a direct quote. I'm saying I'm a human being with a brain who doesn't believe everything that someone in a position of influence says. And what he's saying right there is basically Marcus has no preordained ideas of what was going to work. He just listens to people that know what it takes and applied those lessons. That's what he's saying without saying it. That's what he's saying. Marcus Freeman absolutely had preordained ideas of what was going to work. The difference is when it doesn't work, Marcus Freeman doesn't blame Notre Dame, doesn't blame his coordinators, doesn't blame the nutrition program, doesn't blame the admissions office, doesn't blame Jack Swarbrick, doesn't blame anybody else. He says, I got to go make a change, and he makes a change. That's the difference. He had ideas. One of the things I criticized him for is he gives his assistant coaches and coordinators too much responsibility. That was an absolute plan of Marcus Freeman's because, like a lot of young head coaches, they become a head coach for the first time. They apply this. I'm going to treat my assistant coaches like I wanted to be treated. The problem with that is not all assistant coaches are as focused or as self-motivated or have the chops that you have. So you can't assume that they're all going to do the job the same way you did. He's had to learn that, while also still wanting to give his coaches authority and say in what they're doing. That's why guys like to work for him. That's why whenever he loses a good coach, he replaces him with a good coach. Why? Because he has a reputation in the business for someone who's going to demand a lot of you, but he's going to let you do your job. He's not going to micromanage. But if you don't do what you need to do, he's going to fix it. And he's going to make sure that he's going to fix it, and then you're going to have to go somewhere else. So this notion that he doesn't have preordained of this is what we're going to do and the way we're going to do it, he acted like he said, well, we're not just going to come in and run a 4-2-5. What are you saying? He just showed up. I was like, well, I'm not really sure what I want to run at Notre Dame, so I'm going to listen to people that I respect. No, he had a very clear idea of what he wanted to do, but would still listen to people he respects to make sure there's nothing that we're missing here, that I've considered all the options. This is what I want to do. What do you guys think? That's a good idea. Let's adopt that. We've gone into meetings at Irish Breakdown, and I have a very clear idea of what I want to do. But then do you guys get an opportunity to speak into that and offer ideas? Sometimes I take them. Sometimes I don't. Because, yeah, I got a pretty good idea, but hey, man, Trev, that was a great idea. Let's add that. That doesn't mean I didn't come in with some preordained idea of what I wanted to do. When we met about the magazine, I had the whole magazine laid out. Did I not? Everything. Cover page, all of it. Did we add things after that meeting because you guys had great ideas? Yes, we did. Because I respect you, and I think you guys bring great value. That's different than saying I had no preordained idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to create a magazine. I wanted to be this way. I wanted to be that way. I want to be that way. Here's what I'm thinking we're going to write about. What do you guys think? And then you guys give great ideas. I take some. I don't take some. And now the product's better than it would have been if it was just me. That's the difference between Marcus Freeman and Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly had a way of doing things, and he didn't give a crap about what you thought about it. He was going to do it his way. And he wanted people around him that would just, yes, coach, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. That's why he hired Jeff Quinn and not Bob Bostad or Jeff Gilbert. That's why he promoted Tommy Rees, who I think is an excellent offensive mind. I just thought he got promoted a little bit too early instead of bringing in Todd Monken or Joe Moorhead, because he wanted someone he could control. And why? Because then when things went well, he could say, look at how great I am. I saw the genius of Tommy Rees. Anyone with a brain could spend 5 minutes with Tommy Rees and realize this guy's wicked smart. So that's the difference. Marcus Freeman had a preordained idea. He just understood that, hey, I'm not the only one in this building with good ideas. That's different. So this little, he listens to people he respects. He doesn't have a preordained, this is the way we're doing it. He's going to listen to people and then he'll get there. As if Marcus Freeman just walks into the season like, okay, let's build this 26 team. I want to win a championship. How do you guys think we should get there? That's a great idea. That's great. You know what I mean? Like it was the most obvious backhanded compliment I've ever seen a coach give.
Yeah, without a doubt. Vince, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, and you can answer both all-encompassing, but another quote that Brian Kelly had was about Marcus Freeman and the recruiting trail. One of the biggest disparaging gaps between Marcus Freeman and Brian Kelly is what Freeman has done on the recruiting trail in a very short amount of time compared to Kelly's stint. And he went on to say that, Marcus Freeman's personality, it's warm and it's engaging. He does a really good job of developing those contacts and connections. Then he also went on to say you really have to be able to pull a couple of those big 5 stars or those elite players, and Marcus has the personality to do it. I'm not saying I didn't. We just had 4 or 5-star commits to us at LSU before I left. And so, again, here's what I would tell you. It's work. There's no doubt about it. and the work that you have to put in. And Marcus has been put in a significant position, and it's put Notre Dame in a position where they have the kind of depth that you've talked about. So all encompassing here, Vince, what are your thoughts and takeaways?
So I read that quote, and obviously I didn't watch it live. I'm reading it off paper, right? I'm reading the quote. And the fact, of course, he kind of shoots a compliment about Marcus's personality, but then he brings it back to himself. And then he says, recruiting is hard work. And he's right. It is hard work.
Well, he didn't like to do it.
Right. That's what my point. Like, he knew that it was hard work, and you had to put in the sweat hours, the man hours into the recruiting. And he's giving Marcus Freeman credit for doing that. But at the same time, in my own head, I'm thinking, well, you know that it's hard work. Then why didn't you do it when you were here? Like that's what was going on in my head. Like, he understands that it is hard work and you got to put the work in, and he's giving Marcus Freeman credit for putting the work in. My follow-up would be, then why didn't you do that? Now, obviously in an interview setting, that's not what you're going to do, but that was in my head. That's what I was thinking, because we witnessed it for over a decade of him not putting in that extra work that Marcus Freeman puts in, that we see him putting in. Yes, Marcus Freeman is engaging. Yes, he's got a great personality. No question, right? Brian Kelly could be that way if he wanted to. He
Exactly.
absolutely. I've seen it.
He didn't win at Grand Valley State and Cincinnati because he's an idiot.
Correct. 100%. He was pulling in really good recruits for that level at Grand Valley. He was pulling in really good recruits at Cincinnati for that level. No question about it.
Years of Grand Valley, Vince, were not just we won a bunch of 10-6 games.
No, it was dominant. Dominant. And if his quarterback doesn't go down, I think they win another one too.
They win 3 in a row.
Yeah.
100% correct. The year before they won the back-to-back, their starting quarterback got hurt, I think, in the semis.
Yeah.
They won that game and lost a championship game where they just didn't score. You 100% correct. If he doesn't go down, I think they win 3 in a row.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct.
And this is, you've, especially at that level, this. At that level, you got to put in work. You got to find those diamonds in the rough. You've got to put in the work. So that was what was even more frustrating. You and I had this conversation on numerous occasions. I remember being on the phone talking to you about it. We talked about his success early on in his career and how he was a grinder, man. Like, he would grind on the recruiting trail. He would do all the things that needed to be done. He worked his way up. He was a D coordinator. He was, he did all of these things. And then he gets to Notre Dame and it's like, I'm at the top of the hill. I don't have to do that stuff anymore. And that's what was the most frustrating thing of all, is that I've seen him do it. I know he's got it in him. I know he can do it. He's choosing not to do it.
And then blaming everybody else when it doesn't work out.
Exactly.
No one forced him to make Brian Van Gorder $1 million coordinator at a time where not many coordinators were making $1 million. Nobody forced him to do that.
Right.
Nobody forced him to bring him back in 2015. Nobody forced him to bring him back in 2016. This wasn't about Notre Dame was like, hey, we're not going to let you fire a guy after 1 year. No, you made the decision because your arrogance and your unwillingness. And I know, for the person running cover in the chat for Brian Kelly right now, I know there were people around Brian Kelly in 2014 that were like, I don't think this is going to work. And ignored them.
Right.
And he doesn't realize that now, and he's given Marcus Freeman credit for it because he lacked. No, he's giving him a backhanded compliment.
Mm-hmm.
He did it twice. He talked about how great the facilities are now,
mm-hmm.
and how great everything is now, and that Marcus Freeman listens to people. Doesn't have a preordained idea of this is what we're going to do. That's different than saying, okay, he had a pretty good plan. The thing I like about Marcus Freeman is this is exactly the truth. Here's what I love about Marcus Freeman. He absolutely has a way of things he believes in. But if someone that he respects and trusts says, hey, coach, I think we should do it a different way, and then can show and make an argument for why they do, he's willing to give it a try. He's willing to make a chance.
Mm-hmm.
He's willing to trust people that he says, hey, you want to bring this guy in? Cool. I'll trust you to bring in Chancey Stuckey. But the minute Chancey Stuckey shows he's not willing to do the job, he's out.
Yep.
That's the difference. There's no making excuses. None of that. So it was absolutely a backhanded compliment. And you know what's sad? I don't even think he was trying to give a backhanded compliment. I just think he's incapable of saying, you know what? The guy's done a phenomenal job. Like, he's got to give him credit and then spend 10 minutes before and after talking about how well They've got this now. They've realized this now.
Right.
They're doing this now. They got this going on now. Hey, brother, you had NIL at LSU and still couldn't win.
Right.
We landed five-star recruits and still couldn't win. You had a Heisman Trophy winner, still couldn't win. Went 22-3 at home. You're still on that thing, huh?
Well,
right. Okay. Well, I mean, aren't you also paid to win on the road? Aren't you also paid to beat ranked teams? Something he never did at Notre Dame. Brian Kelly had a losing record in his career against top 15 teams at Notre Dame. There's a stretch where Lou Holtz had more top 15 wins in 1989 than Brian Kelly had for like almost a decade.
Well, Marcus Freeman did it in 8 days, so
right.
There's that.
Well, that's another topic that we're going to talk about soon.
I do want to say this. Is Notre Dame better situated from a facility standpoint now than they were when he left? Yes. Here's the other thing, though. And does that make recruiting slightly easier? Yes, it does. I get it. The shiny, the new, like I get it. That they were planning that Shields building while Brian Kelly was the head coach. Like that was coming, and that's all know
for a while.
We all know it takes time at Notre Dame. They're a unicorn when it comes. We got to have all the money up front. The whole thing like that takes time. Okay, like it takes time. I get it.
Yeah,
he knows that. So to say like, oh, they've got all this stuff now, that was all in the works when you were here, man. Like that. Don't make it about that stuff.
Yep.
That's my thing. Don't make it about that stuff. Does that make it easier? Does that help you? Yes, it does, but it doesn't take away from the fact that you got to grind. You got to get on the trail and you got to grind. And he didn't want to do that.
And at LSU, he had everything that he wanted. Yeah,
absolutely. As walking in the door, he didn't have to wait for it. He had that walking in the door. And let's be honest, that's why he left, right? Because he thought it was going to be easier. Yep. That's why he left. He thought it was going to be easier. And you can look at all the quotes.
Because he changed nothing.
Correct.
He changed nothing. There were no lessons he learned at Notre Dame.
No.
And I know that because I've talked to people at LSU. Even when they were running cover for him, they would say, well, yeah, he still does that, but it's okay because he's at LSU now.
Exactly. They thought that was going to, cover up any of his warts.
The biggest realization that I think LSU people have now is because, like, I'm going to be a little fair to the LSU people that cover the team and fans because they're saying, like, it is hilarious to see how many people on Twitter now love to tell LSU people, we told you so. I don't remember this many of you being around when I was getting hammered every week for hating on Brian Kelly. I don't remember all these people that told people so when they left. I remember getting a lot of flack from people.
You were
my last couple of years about how I went after Brian Kelly too much, and I had a personal vendetta against Brian Kelly, and all this other kind of stuff. But now all of a sudden everybody was like, I told you so. But everybody nobody wants to believe that their coach isn't good enough. Because the minute you accept that is when you realize we're just not going to win. And what fun is being a fan if you know your team can't win? Win the things you expect them to win as a program. I mean, for some people, that may just be a Big 12 championship, and that's okay. It's okay that Iowa State has different standards than Notre Dame. It's okay that Kansas has different standards than Notre Dame. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're at Kansas, you want to know that, hey, our program has a chance to actually accomplish the things, and not just have a chance like this particular team, but just in general, this may be a year, maybe next year's the year. But when you're just like, we don't have this to win, we just always know we're going to be here. That's not a place you want to be. And so I'll give LSU fans, and I also think that the media did such a good job of running cover for Brian Kelly and buying in his lies about the different aisles and well, it's hard to get top players because they don't want to go to school. That was never true. And I said that for decades. Brian and Smith and I were joking about this the other day. It was never about kids not wanting to go to school. Myron Rolle went to Florida State, became a Rhodes Scholar and a neurosurgeon. He wanted to get an education, but he wanted to play for a good football program too. So this whole notion that, Notre Dame didn't have all these things and now we're winning. And so I get LSU fans believed what some Notre Dame fans believed. And there are still some that still believe that, it wasn't Brian Kelly's fault. Notre Dame didn't have this, and this, and they didn't, they gave all that to Marcus Freeman and that's why he's winning. Because I'm going to tell you something right now. If everything was the same NIL, same this, same that, Notre Dame still isn't recruiting as well if Brian Kelly's still the head football coach.
No chance.
Because he got out-recruited by Notre Dame every year that he was at LSU.
Correct.
Every year. And they got 5 stars in their state constantly. And so this idea that somehow Notre Dame has changed and learned its lessons is false. And this notion that Brian Kelly somehow grew from his time at Notre Dame and became a better coach is a lie, because as I would talk with LSU people then, even when he was there and they were running cover, they would acknowledge in conversations that, no, Brian Kelly doesn't do that, but he doesn't have to. It's LSU. It recruits itself. They would admit it and not even realize they were admitting that he was the same guy at Notre Dame that he is now. But LSU is a better place than Notre Dame. And what you're realizing now is LSU's a place you can win. This isn't Notre Dame's better than LSU. It's you can win at LSU with the right guy. You can win at Notre Dame at the right guy. But that right guy has to work his butt off. And say what you want about Ed Orgeron, and he was not a very good head football coach. But you know what he did? He worked his tail off in recruiting. And he was willing to say, hey, listen, the way that we're playing offense right now isn't going to work. Let's go outside the box and get this Joe Brady guy, bring in, and we'll make some changes. I mean, Les Miles and Ed Orgeron won a championship at LSU. Brian Kelly they got worse every year. That's why they got rid of him. Not because you have 4 years to win a title. No, it's because, dude, you got worse every freaking year. That's why you got let go. So the reality is that LSU can win. LSU was not the problem. Brian Kelly was the problem. What I hope LSU fans are now realizing is that Notre Dame was not the problem. Brian Kelly was the problem. That's why the 2 coaches around him, Charlie Weiss and Brian Kelly, or Marcus Freeman, both recruited better than he did. Mm-hmm. What was the reason that Charlie was able to go bring in? Well, he had this. Yeah, but the facilities were still the same. Worse, actually.
Worse.
Why was he able to bring in 5-star guys? Because he worked his tail. Why was he able to go out and get Manti Te'o after 2 straight losing seasons? Manti Te'o visited Notre Dame on a day where they lost to a 2-win Syracuse team when Notre Dame students were throwing freaking snowballs at Notre Dame players on the field. He was so cold, he left the place and went and watched the game inside and still went to Notre Dame. Why? Because Charlie Weiss worked his butt off to recruit Manti Te'o to Notre Dame. Brian Kelly always looked at that as beneath him. He looked at Notre Dame as a beneath him. He looked at us as Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame media and Notre Dame as an institution as we should look up to him. Thank you for saving us and rescuing us from the drolls and dredges of college football. Without you, Coach Kelly, we would be nowhere.
And we wouldn't have Marcus Freeman because he's the one that brought him in. He has hinted around at that too, by the way, is that, we wouldn't have Marcus Freeman right now if it wasn't for Brian Kelly.
Well, come on, Vince, you didn't know that? Big picture, here's what bothers me about this entire thing. Is I'm sick and tired of Brian Kelly trying to paint himself into the light of a championship caliber head coach, because he's not one, not at this level. Maybe he was at Grand Valley State 20 some odd years ago. Maybe he was at Cincinnati at that level of football, but I'm getting exhausted trying to hear himself continue paint himself as a championship caliber head coach. I'm under the firm belief that there's a few coaches that come along every decade or so that are true championship caliber head coaches. Brian Kelly is not one of those. This entire interview bothered me because it was trying to be a PR cover. He was basically building himself a virtual resume. And that's what really, really bothered me about the entire thing. Not the questions that he was being asked or the platform that he was doing it on. It was his responses. Mm-hmm. If I know Brian Kelly and how he manipulates the media the way that I believe him to have done before in the past, his answers would have been different if he was doing this on an LSU podcast that would have given him the rights to do this. It's not a coincidence that he's talking about, what do you really care about? It's like, player development and setting them up for the future and building relationships with coaches and the academic standards. That's all that he talked about on this interview because it was a Notre Dame podcast. I think he's going to go do an Alabama podcast and talk about the academic standard, or a Georgia podcast and do the academic standard. No, he's going on a PR campaign to try to build up his resume again. That's my issue with this entire thing. I'm open to working any type of job. I'm cool with doing this. And I've had some time to reflect. And could people change? Sure, I guess. But when you're the same person you were for 20 years, you're probably going to be the same person for the next 20 years. And that's the issue that I have with this entire thing. That's what bothers me. During my formative college football years as a fan, I bought into Notre Dame just can't recruit at the same level as Bama. Like I remember the Charlie Weiss recruiting classes and bringing in Floyd and Teo. I was 9. Like that doesn't hit home the same way it does when you're watching a head football coach of a team that you love, tell you consistently. It's like, hey, look, I'm doing this job. I'm the head coach at Notre Dame. I can't do this. So a large portion of the Notre Dame fan base that is of my generation falls into that category. They were being told as 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, like, hey, we just can't do this. Which is where the deep appreciation for Marcus Freeman comes from, that he's gone and killed that narrative. I don't get the experience of, but I remember when Lou did it. I vividly remember the grind on the recruiting trail that Charlie Weiss put in to get Golden Tate, Michael Floyd, and Zach Martin, and Manti Te'o, and Dane Christ. I don't remember that. But I do remember a head coach telling me, as a person going through high school football, that's like, yeah, we just can't recruit at this level. And that's what gets really frustrating.
To your point, you weren't old enough. You were born in 1997. When Jimmy Clausen committed to Notre Dame, you were 10. Actually, not even 10. You were 9 because he committed, I believe, in 06. He was part of the 07 class. You were, barely 10 when Michael Floyd committed. You were barely 12 when Manti committed. But here's the thing, what you do know doing this job, how many times have we said best since and listed a Charlie Weiss recruit as the best since?
Without a doubt.
Like Manti is the standard. Michael Floyd or Golden Tate. Like Tim O'Malley, love talking with Tim O'Malley. We always have this we have this ongoing joke of who's better, Michael Floyd or Golden Tate, because we don't agree on that subject. And so we like to bust each other's chops on it. But here's the point. It doesn't matter. They're both recruited by Charlie Weiss. That's the point. And here's the point for some of you who aren't hearing this. The point we're making is not Charlie Weiss was a great guy. The point is the coach before and the coach after, Brian Kelly was here, had no problem recruiting at Notre Dame. It's the same thing that we heard from Notre Dame fans that ran cover for Autry Denson, who is a great running back, is a very good and decent Christian man, and from everything I've ever heard from people that know him, a great husband and a great father. But he was not a very good coach because he didn't want to recruit. And then when he didn't, and I'd call him out on it, it was, big-time running backs don't want to come to Notre Dame. Well, then why did Tony Alford and then immediately following Autry Denson, Lance Taylor, Dylan McCullough, and Jaywan Sider all recruit well? It's the same point here. Why did the coach before Brian Kelly and the coach after Brian Kelly, why were they both able to recruit, but somehow in between there, big-time players stopped wanting to come to Notre Dame, and there's some conspiracy with the admissions office not let them in. Rivals on 3 released their updated rankings yesterday. Notre Dame had 4 commits in the top 20. 4 4-stars, more than anybody else. Only one other team had 3, and I think that was – who was the one with 3? Oklahoma had 3. Let me tell y'all something. The number 9 player in the country is from a private school in Chicago that absolutely could have got into Notre Dame when Brian Kelly was here. The number 10 player in the country from a public school in Louisiana who chose Notre Dame, for one of the big reasons he chose Notre Dame was because of the difference in academic standard at Notre Dame to compare to other schools. That was not a hindrance to his recruitment. It was a driver of his recruitment. The number 16 overall player in the country from a private school, from a public school in Philadelphia. Same deal. Notre Dame's academic standing was a reason Abraham Cisse liked Notre Dame, not a stumbling block. Number 20, Olu Olubabola, comes from a very good private school in northern Jersey. Outstanding high school student. Again, the academic piece of Notre Dame was a key reason for him choosing Notre Dame. Xavier Hassan, spend 2 minutes talking to one of Xavier Hassan's parents and you realize that's a kid that cares about academics as well. Driver of why he came here. But you know what all those 5 kids also wanted at Notre Dame? They wanted a coach that basically let them know, do you really want me here? Like, how bad are you want to work? Yeah, I mean, I love everything about Notre Dame. I've talked to former players who went other places, and they're like, yeah, I loved everything about Notre Dame, but I didn't want to play for Brian Kelly. I've been told that by former top recruits that picked other schools. So this notion that somehow Notre Dame was the problem, again, was always spin, always a lie, and he's still doing it. He's still doing it. Notre Dame did not change their academic standards. I've explained this on the show before. They changed the process because the process had to adapt to current realities. Has Notre Dame at times been slow to react? Sure, but it didn't take them 11 years to figure that out. There were plenty of kids that could have gotten into Notre Dame with very strict academic standards during Brian Kelly's tenure, but they didn't pick Notre Dame because of Brian Kelly and the lack of work and the lack of quality recruiters that he hired. It was always about Brian Kelly.
And here's the other piece that I want to bring up that it fits right in here is Marcus Freeman made a comment early on in his tenure as the head coach. And it might have been when he was a defensive coordinator. And I think it was in the interview that you did with him when he was a defensive coordinator. You remember that, Brian? You had him on the show. And he said there was a box that Notre Dame recruits had to fit in before you were even allowed to recruit them. And he was able to persuade Brian Kelly to let him make a run at these guys that were high profile guys and to make them into Notre Dame guys. So so what that tells me is that Brian Kelly, when Marcus Freeman got here as the defensive coordinator, is that he manufactured this box that Notre Dame recruits had to fall in before they would even make an attempt to recruit them. And if they didn't fall into that box, they were off the list. They were off the board. It wasn't even going to happen. And Marcus Freeman walked in. He's like, I want to make a run at these studs. I want to make a run at these 5-star guys. I want to show them how they can be Notre Dame men, not make this preconceived notion before I even recruit them. That's the mentality difference between Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman. And Marcus Freeman was trying to change that mentality while he was still a DC here at Notre Dame. And then when he became the head coach, he just blew that whole thing up and just went after whoever he wanted. But that's the difference. Brian Kelly manufactured this box that didn't have to be so that he had an excuse ready in the holster, ready to go. Well, we can't recruit those guys. Those aren't Notre Dame guys. It's the academics. It's
RKG was something he used as an excuse. It's look, Marcus Freeman recruits RKGs. He says it very clearly. Absolutely. He doesn't say RKGs. He says, look, we got to make sure we find kids that fit here at Notre Dame.
100%.
Sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you get it wrong. That's true for everybody. But Brian Kelly did that, and it was basically it was an excuse to bring in kids that are easier to get. That's and any success they did have in the recruiting trail was because there were some coaches who were good recruiters, but not enough. And that's why some of those guys that were really good recruiters weren't here very long. There's a reason why Mike Elko left after 1 year. And I can tell you it's not for the reasons that were said publicly, that were nothing but talking points from Brian Kelly and his people. And you know how I know that? Do you know that one of the coaches and one of the people that followed him to LSU literally ran around to different people in the media kind of doing the same thing he did at Notre Dame, lying to him. And I know this for a fact. Whenever there was a couple different LSU people I went on, it was made very clear to me that somebody that Brian Kelly hired basically went in there and told the guy a bunch of lies, a bunch of excuses, a bunch of different stuff about Notre Dame. And the guy was like, well, why would this guy lie to me about it? You know what I mean? Like he's a coach at LSU. And then obviously after the fact, I think that guy now realizes that that's kind of how it went, that because he did the same thing at LSU. So this isn't Brian Kelly. Like, honestly, guys, if Brian Kelly would actually do a real mea culpa, I'd move past it. Hey, look, you know what? I didn't put enough into building up young men. Notre Dame cares about that, and I didn't do enough about it. I wasn't around enough for my players. I've talked to some of my former players, and that's one of the constant criticisms I heard it at LSU as well. I wasn't around enough. Looking back, I should have made some better decisions as a coach. And Notre Dame was such a great experience for my family, which he said, which I appreciated. Talked about how his daughter graduated from Notre Dame, which is excellent. It's a tremendous opportunity for her. But there was always this okay, this was cool, but then he blames Notre Dame for all the reasons he didn't win. There's no learned lessons here. This is nothing more than Brian Kelly running a PR campaign because Brian Kelly wants to coach again with no accountability for what he did. Him saying we didn't win enough football games is not taking accountability for why he didn't win at LSU. And the things he said today about Notre Dame and about Marcus Freeman are further evidence he has not taken accountability for anything that he did. And, I've never taken cheap shots at Brian Kelly. I've never brought up the unfortunate situation where a young man, you know what I mean? I've never blamed him for that. I've never got into that. I don't know enough about it. I've never used that as a cudgel against him. I've never really used many of the off the field things as a cudgel against him, because I think the goal is not to score points, to somehow make him look bad and use things that to a degree, like, do you really know that you can blame that on him? I don't. I know people that do. I know people that don't. I don't know enough about it to have an opinion on that. So I'm not going to use that in some way to take a shot where I'm just trying to tear the guy down. I'm telling you the facts of what I did see and what I do know. And the reality is when I listen to Brian Kelly today, it's the same Brian Kelly that left Notre Dame. The only humility he has is he now knows, because I got fired and because I didn't win there, I now have to rehabilitate my image so I can get hired again. He knows very well what his players said about him when he left LSU. Very well. He knows very well what was said about him by his players in Notre Dame when he left. He knows that very well. This is nothing more than a spin job and an attempt to rehabilitate his. It was Vince, you said it at the beginning when we were talking before the show. This was 100% a self-serving attempt by Brian Kelly to rehabilitate his image. There's no lessons learned here. There's no, you know what, looking back, I should have done this. There's none of that. None of that in here. And his whole attempt that the worst is, we'll end with this. The worst is when he basically said, I'm coming back to Notre Dame to spend time around the program, which I'm bothered by, but there's nothing I can do about it. Notre Dame has never cared about my opinion. Still don't care about my opinion. So they're going to do what they're going to do.
He said he wants to.
No, he's going to be. He is. He's going to be back here in August. Yes, he is. Whatever. I don't care. I mean, I do care, but I'm not going to dwell on that. But his whole thing, I want Notre Dame people to know that I approve, basically. Trev, do you have the direct quote? Basically, he wants Notre Dame people to know that I support Notre Dame, that was you. The fact that you think more than 5 people in this chat give a rip about what you think about Notre Dame or Marcus Freeman, that somehow we need you to come back and say, oh, we love this. We're so happy that Marcus Freeman, has Brian Kelly support. We don't care. What I care about is that you're lying and that you're trying to whitewash your tenure at Notre Dame and LSU. And you keep talking about it, I'm going to talk about it. The minute you go away and stop talking about Notre Dame, I'll stop talking about you. How about that? Because that's all. This was 100% self-serving. 100% self-serving. And an attempt at rebuilding his career so he can get back into coaching.
The official quote was, I have that as one of my stops when he was asked if he was coming back to South Bend. He said, I obviously want to. Obviously, it's important for me to let them know that I am supporting and I want to support the program that out there, and I want to be visible for a day. I'm not in there to look at what they're running offensively or defensively, but I just want to show that I have 100% faith and confidence in what they're doing and how they're doing it. Not that they need me to validate it in any way, but I want our fans to know, the Notre Dame fans, that I'm 100% supporting of what they're doing and how they're doing it on a day-to-day basis. Gentlemen.
I mean, do you really the fact that he thinks that people care about his opinion in a way.
Right. Well, thank God Kelly's supporting him.
I cared that Lou Holtz supported Marcus Freeman. That's what I cared about.
Correct.
I don't care that what Brian Kelly thinks about, because I don't think Brian Kelly actually does that. I even think that came across as self-serving and self-absorbed. And that's always been the problem. Guys, trust me, Marcus Freeman has a giant ego, as does every successful coach that there's ever been, as do I. There's nothing wrong with having an ego, but there's a difference between having an ego and being a narcissist. And a narcissist is unwilling to listen, unwilling to look in the mirror, and unwilling to say, hey, you know what? I was the problem. That's the difference. And when you listen to Marcus Freeman talk about why they don't achieve their success, it's always me, 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 me. And you see that backed up by changes he makes within the program. Is he a perfect coach? No. Has he proven that he can be something that Brian Kelly is not? No, he's not, because he hasn't won a championship yet. But I promise you that even in 4 years, you'll find more former Marcus Freeman players that will go to bat for his character than you will former Brian Kelly players. I won't say I talked to someone. I won't even say that because it may betray somebody's confidence, and I wasn't told that. But I can just tell you, there's a lot of former players and I asked a former player, so why do you guys not say these things publicly? And the answer is because it would hurt Notre Dame more than it would hurt Brian Kelly, and that's why they don't talk about it. Now we could agree to disagree on that, but that's why they don't talk about it. That's why they say things privately,
right? Well, that's why they didn't really say anything at all during Kelly's tenure. Like it was like church mice. There was no peep from, but you knew like they weren't there. Like you and I have been going to games for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
I've been going to games since 2004. There have been more former players that come back to Notre Dame and get introduced on the Jumbotron and introduced at, at a timeout or whatever than I've ever seen before. In the last 4 years, you could count them up. Way more than the decade prior. I'll just leave it at that, right? So many more players. And they're not just former Marcus Freeman players. They're former Notre Dame players who played for Kelly, who played for Weiss, who played for Willingham, who played for whoever. They're all welcome back. And they're celebrated.
Former Kelly players I've talked to that have said, I wish I could have played for Marcus Freeman.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Several.
And they're Notre Dame guys, so they're not going to say something that will denigrate the University of Notre Dame by saying bad stuff. They're not going to do that. They're better men than I am. And so, but their actions speak louder than words. I'll say that. Their actions speak louder than words. And it's not just that they're invited back. They are celebrated when they're back.
Welcomed back.
Yes. They're welcomed and celebrated. That's the difference.
And they're not props.
Correct.
They're not. They're hey, you guys are what this is the end of the day. Marcus Freeman understands that Notre Dame is a unique, special place. Is it the only unique, special place in college football? No. Is it maybe the most unique and special place? You could argue that, but it's irrelevant. It is a unique and special place. And Marcus Freeman has embraced that. He understands that what makes Notre Dame different is what makes it better and what makes it stronger. And the previous coach always looked at those things as excuses and stumbling blocks for why he couldn't succeed, because he was unwilling to do what really needed to be done, which is look in the mirror and say, I was the problem. Correct. Why did Charlie Weiss win his first 2 years and not his last 3 years? There was nothing about Notre Dame that changed. He didn't do the job, and he was one to own that when he left. Now, I think Charlie has some bitterness based on how he was treated, and honestly, to some degree, I don't even think it's about him. I think he has some bitterness on how his children were treated by people at Notre Dame. But he always said, hey, I didn't do a good enough job. Brian Kelly was still unwilling to do that. He said that about LSU. He's never said that about Notre Dame. His is always, I took it as far as I could take it.
Yes.
But the thing is, no, he didn't. And this is the frustrating thing, Brian Kelly could have won at Notre Dame. And when I mean won, I don't mean the BS spin that people say, well, Brian Kelly's record was this. And then ignore the fact that in those years that you point to, they were 5-5 against ranked teams. We'll ignore that for a second. We'll ignore for a second that in one of his best years ever, 2015, the only ranked win they had was against Navy. We'll ignore the fact that in his last 11-1 win, they did not beat a single team that was ranked in the top 25 at the end of the year. Another gift from Jack Swarbrick of easy schedules. Like, that's not the standard at Notre Dame. The standard is all-encompassing. And when you look at Notre Dame as the problem, you're never going to succeed. And ultimately, that's what Bob Davie did. That's what Ty Willingham did. That's what Brian Kelly did. And that's why at the end of the day, well, why was Brian Kelly more successful? Because he was a way better coach than Ty Willingham and Bob Davie. It's funny listening to a Brian Kelly apology in the chat. It's like, oh, he was a good coach, guys. I'm like, yeah, we literally said that. Like, literally said that in the show. That's what's so frustrating, because he could have won more. He should have won more. But the reason he didn't was him.
Right.
And that bothers me. But you know what bothers me more than the football piece? It's the personal piece, that he did not value the things that he said. He had a great comment at the end about Notre Dame. Trev, if you could find it for me, where he talked about what makes Notre Dame unique. And it says to me, Vince, the thing I pushed back on something you said earlier is he didn't understand. No, I think that comment shows he very much understood. I just don't think he liked it. because he didn't embrace those things. They were an
Right.
antithesis to him. Or he just let the school do those things. I don't have to develop young people because Notre Dame does that. And that's the difference. Marcus Freeman understands that there are certain things that Notre Dame handles. It's not our job as football coaches to teach kids physics. It's our job as football coaches to make sure that those kids are engaged when they go and that they understand why they're here and that we bring young men here who get that. It's not our job to teach kids history and physics and poetry or whatever other, business or whatever else. Ours is develop young people, and we're not passing that buck off to anybody. That's our job. And that's a difference. Do you have that quote, Trev?
I do. It was one of the last questions that he got asked, and it was on if there was anything he appreciates about Notre Dame differently now that he's coached somewhere else. And he said there's certainly some non-negotiables that Notre Dame still has that I think we all hold dear, and it's centered around academics and how important that is. I think that touched me deeply in my time at Notre Dame. It's not just about dress up the stadium and play football. There's other things, it's about developing the entire man. And I respect that about Notre Dame and their understanding and knowing. And this was kind of a phrase that I used in my last few years, is that let's not apologize for being elite in academics and in football. And I think they're at the point there is that, they're not going to apologize for being Notre Dame or being elite at football. And I think that's an awesome place to be.
And yet his entire tenure, he made excuses for Notre Dame and why they couldn't win. He used those same things as an excuse why he couldn't win.
Correct.
Some publicly, a lot privately. That's why he didn't win. But I was happy to hear that because I'm like, that's one of the best things I've heard somebody say about Notre Dame, because they don't. And then you know what? They haven't sacrificed that under Marcus Freeman either. Those things still very much hold true. The difference is you now have a head coach who embraces that, not one who fights against it or feels that it's something that needs to be conquered or we have to win in spite of, or those things limit our ceiling as a program. That ultimately might be the best way to say it without trying to take another shot at Brian Kelly. I think ultimately that's the fairest thing to say, is Brian Kelly always believed that there was a ceiling on the program because of all these things that were holding him back. And I think he genuinely believed that. And I still think he genuinely believes that, which is, again, is why I say he's a narcissist, because he still looks at it that way. I don't think they were like, hey, I don't want to work. And I know we could win a championship here, but I don't want to put in the work to do that. I believe that was actually what was going on, but I don't think consciously that was a decision he made. And then, so now I got to spin it. I think he genuinely believed all the BS he said, which is actually worse, in my opinion, because he's just totally out of touch with reality. And that's my final piece on this is that he always looked at those things about Notre Dame as somehow a stumbling block. Marcus Freeman looks at him as a reason that makes us different. And they sell the heck out of it. And guess what? It works. Every single 5-star kid that's committed to Notre Dame right now, the academic piece, the religious piece, the uniqueness of Notre Dame was a selling point on Notre Dame. They didn't get those kids in spite of those things. They got those kids in part, not entirely, because if they sold all those things to those kids and they were coming off of an 8-4 year, I don't think they get all 4 of them. Maybe get 1 or 2, but they don't get all 4 of them. And so, but it's a part of it. And that needed to be stated.
Gentlemen, let's switch gears and talk about the Notre Dame offense here on the Notre Dame podcast, Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. As our girl Karen in the chat pointed out, we are now 54 days away from Notre Dame kicking off their 2026 season against the Wisconsin Badgers up in Lambeau Field. And there are some things that have to be ironed out on both sides of the ball. We're sticking consistent with the theme that we've had this offseason, where we're talking about offense on Tuesday and we'll talk about defense on Thursday. Today, we're going to be talking about the position battles on the offensive side of the ball. And this is one where, no, it's not as high octane as last year's, where it's who's going to be the starting quarterback and who's going to step into this role. But there are a lot of position battles that are worth discussing as Notre Dame prepares to gear up for fall camp.
I would say more position battles, just less spotlight position battles like last year, where it's like,
for sure,
it was quarterback. Oh, okay. That's a pretty big one. There weren't a lot of, maybe slot receiver. There weren't any battles at tight end. I don't know. Right guard, once Jagasaw went down, right guard became one. But yeah, there weren't a lot of battles, but they were the one they had was a big one. And it certainly took up a lot of oxygen. But there's, as you mentioned, Trev, there's some very important position battles that are going to be raged in summer. And they started in the winter, carried into the spring. They will continue in the summer. And then, of course, they'll continue in fall camp. And some of them are going to continue through the season, because just because you win the starting job on day one doesn't mean you're going to have the starting job on, day 20 or 50 or 100 or 200. And, so some of them I think might be decided sooner. Some of them are a little closer than others, but that's what's going to make this a very interesting fall camp, because I do think, and some of them aren't even for starters. Some of them are for depth, and the depth that helps this team win should their number be called, but also depth when looking forward to the future. And hey, you win this battle, you go into spring ball with sort of the leg up on the competition. And that's something. Yeah.
One of the things these position battles do have in common with last year is I think a lot of them will dictate and will say a lot about how good Notre Dame's offense can be. Spent a lot of time this offseason talking about, hey, they're coming off of a season where they set a program record in points per game and yards per play, and CJ Carr, who's a favorite on FanDuel to win the Heisman Trophy, that he shattered the program record for passer efficiency rating. Knowing that we can say that and there's still another level for this offense to get to is a really good spot. And Brian, a lot of these position battles that we're getting ready to talk about are going to dictate how good this offense can be and what their true ceiling is.
Yeah, it is. And to varying degrees, Trev, but yes, they're going to have a very big say on how good this offense will be. And some of them are not, if this guy wins the job, it's like, if this is a battle where two guys prove themselves, boy, that's going to make this team way better. Sometimes, Trevor, a guy wins a job and you don't feel great about it because neither guy won the job. This guy just was not as bad as, sometimes a guy wins a job because he was better than another guy. Sometimes, Trev, guys win jobs because they weren't as bad as another guy.
Like now, sometimes they win it because they just didn't lose the job.
Yeah, right. And now I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case this year. That's been the case in past years. We're like, so-and-so won the job at right guard. Well, technically, but it's just because he wasn't very good, but the other guy was worse. And that's why he won the job. I don't think that's going to be the case, which is partly why I think these battles will be so impactful on their season. And then finally, when you're having the depth that you have, that Notre Dame has on offense, and you have the talented players battling for these jobs that they have, there's also an impact of, if this guy wins it, most likely he's going to have to really play to as close to his full potential as possible, which means that's going to make the team better. And if he doesn't, there's somebody behind him that can come in and do it even better. And that's something that raises the floor and the ceiling of a football team.
Well, let's dive into it, man. Let's talk about some of the places and position groups that Notre Dame is going to be having a position battle in fall camp and in summer workouts. And it starts with the running back room. They are tasked with replacing Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Obviously, Love won the Doak Walker Award, first in program history. Both backs were taken in the first round of the NFL draft, set records in that sense as well. And they're entering a period of the offseason where between Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young and Nolan James and the entire pecking order of the running back room is somewhat up for debate. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this starts to shake out in fall camp.
When I look at this one, Trevor, this is a battle where I think we have an idea of where it is right now and how it's going to shake out for the starter, but it's not entirely set. But even if we work with the assumption that Aeneas Williams is the one, I still think there's a battle for who's going to be 2 and who's going to be 3 and all of that. And I think what's interesting about the running back battle is whoever steps up as the guy, obviously he's going to have a lot of pressure on him. Who seizes hold of that? And will Jaywan Sider be like, hey, I'm just going to play one guy? And we'll talk about more of that in the future segment. But there's a comment that Mike Denbrock made to us in the magazine that you guys have to see. But basically, it's kind of like right now the impetus is on the players. You give me a reason to play 3 guys. You give me a reason to play 4 guys. And that's really what we see here. At running back, it's not just, okay, who wins the job for number 1? That's going to be impactful. And if it's not Aeneas Williams, based on what he's done in 2 years, it probably means somebody had a monster fall camp. I don't see a scenario where Aeneas Williams is like takes a step back or doesn't work hard or anything. I've never heard ever once I've heard anything about Aeneas not being a hard worker or not putting in the work. And I believe he's as healthy as he's been since 2024. So if he's not starting, the odds are pretty good that somebody had a great fall camp. But even if we say, okay, Aeneas does what he does, he's the best guy. He maybe some other guys are more talented, but they're 2 years younger. He is the best guy right now. I still think there's going to be a very interesting conversation to be had about who forces their way into the number 2 and number 3 spot. And that's as exciting for me as this battle for number 1, because I don't think number 1 is set in stone, even though we all, I think, agree that it's probably going to be Aeneas, and I'm okay with that. It's just that I'm not ready to write off the rest of the depth chart just yet. And it's not a knock on Aeneas. It's just how good I think the rest of the depth chart is. But does the number 2 and the number 3 say, hey, whether I start or not, you're going to play me this year because I'm going to perform at a level where you have no choice. And that's where I am kind of fired up to watch this running back battle in fall camp draft.
Yeah, and they're going to need to. The players in the depth are going to have to step up really since 2020, because 2019, Tony Jones had the brunt of the carries, and then the 2 other leading rushers in terms of yardage behind Tony Jones in 19 was Ian Book and Braden Lindsey. So really since 2020, we're starting to see, that's when we started to see Notre Dame utilize a lot more depth at running back. In 2020, they had Kyron Williams, Ian Book with his legs, and then obviously Chris Tyree as a true freshman. And then, in 22, they rotate between Audric and Diggs. And in 23, Audric carried the brunt of the load. He had the lion's share of carries, but we still saw Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love. And then obviously the spectacular duo of Love and Price in 24 and 25. So they're absolutely going to need to. I'm with you completely. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this shakes out, as am I with the wide receiver battle. The running back is not the only position that has to backfill an impactful player from last season. Malachi Fields has also departed. Mm-hmm. And the pecking order right now for boundary receiver and Mike Denbrock's offense has not yet been worked out.
Yeah, this boundary one to me is very important, because we're going to talk about slot receiver next, but that's a position where it's like there's 2 really good players, one that's proven, one that's not, but super gifted, that that are battling for that job. And that'll be a different conversation to have. This is one where I think there's uncertainty in how good will the position be, where the slot battle is like, I don't know who's going to win it. I think I kind of have an idea, but I think they're both going to play. They're both difference makers. Like, there's a confidence that they're going to be good. And if this guy's going to start, it means he had to beat out a really good player and vice versa. With boundaries, kind of like, I don't know that we can say that it's a position where someone's going to win it, because it is a group of guys that I don't think have proven themselves to be anywhere on the level of the players that we see to the field. And so how this win, whoever wins, how they win it is going to be way more important than what we just said about running back, than what we will say about the slot position, what we will say about right guard. We're going to talk about the right guard position battle as well. And this is a very different story than that one. And that's what makes this maybe intriguing. And I keep getting asked, what's the concern you have about Notre Dame? And I was like, I don't really have concerns. What are you afraid? I'm not afraid of anything. It's right now, my biggest concern is, will another team just be better? But if I was forced to say, pick something about Notre Dame that you think could be a concern for you, this would be it. Does anybody in the boundary really step up? We've heard great things about Micah Gilbert in fall camp, but he's never shown it in spring ball and summer workouts. And he's always a guy that coaches rave about. I mean, I had somebody inside the program tell me that he was Leonard Moore's kryptonite before spring practice, and then he wasn't at all Leonard Moore's kryptonite in spring practice. You know what I mean? And it's like, he didn't carry that performance into when we saw it, or the blue gold game, or into games last season. But we also can see talent, Trev. Like, we also see things we see in practice, what they see. Like, I get it. Cam Williams, I've had multiple people inside the program say, hey, that's the most physically gifted receiver we have. He's just got to figure it out. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can focus on the talent, but then there also needs to be the focus on why can't he figure it out yet? And will that change? We don't know the answer. And then, of course, we hear from Ohio State people how much they loved Quincy Porter and how they didn't want him to go and all this other kind of stuff. And that's fine. I've never seen him in a Notre Dame uniform, and he caught 4 passes last year. And with all due respect, if he was, you'd think that if he was that good, they could have found a way to play him a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like, play him together. You telling me Jeremiah Smith can't play the opposite of Quincy Porter and move around a bit? So you look at those things, Trev, and you say, look, there's two things that we can say definitively about the boundary receiver battle. One, everyone involved in it is a really talented player. Really talented. And we didn't even bring up Devin Fitzgerald because I don't think he's really pushing for it right now, although he may down the road. But of those three non-freshmen, they're all extremely gifted to some degree. But they're also equally as big of question marks as far as whether they can be the guy. And I'm hoping that the position battle will force at least one of them to step up and say, seize it. It's like I was watching, Troy the other day, right? There's that scene on, where they're about to land on the beach in Troy. And he's like, look there, immortality, it's yours, seize it. And it's like, that's what I want here. If you like, I love using movie references, the scene from Miracle. This is your opportunity. Take it. I want to see somebody at boundary take it. Not just of the three, he made the fewest mistakes and was the most counted on. I don't want to hear that. That's a concern for me. Dependable. We know he knows what he's doing. Those are not things I want to hear from my sources about why insert player's name won the boundary job. I want it to be like, dude was a playmaker. Dude was unguardable. Dude was making big plays, and then also dependable and all that. But like, don't lead with that. It's like if you're describing a person, male or female, someone you're going on a date with, and you explain it to your buddies, and you spend 5 minutes talking about, she had a nice car and she's dressed real nice and she picked up the tab, but you don't ever talk about her personality or her looks. People are going to assume like, well, that means she was, she probably didn't have much personality or didn't have good looks, right? Like, you're leaving out some really important details here of this situation. And you want to hear, she was funny. She had this, she had that. She was intelligent. She was engaging, and she was beautiful. Like, hey, that's all great things. Not like, well, of the four unattractive people that I have in front of me, I picked the one that was, whatever. Or of the four unintelligent people that I interviewed for the job, I picked the one that was the least stupid. Like, hey, why did you hire that guy? Man, I interviewed him and he knocked it out of the park, man. He did this, he did that. It was wonderful. I was so happy. Not like, well, of the options, he was the least bad. Like, there's certain words you hear that you're like, yeah, that's not an endorsement. Like that's you justifying why this person wasn't as bad as the others. I want to hear about the guy that's winning, or the guys that are forcing their way in the rotation were actually balling out, not they were the most trustworthy. They knew what route to run every time we went out there. Great. Did they make any plays? We could really depend on them to be out there and do their job. Okay, that's not good. That's not good. That's important, but that can't be what you lead with.
Yeah. Yeah, without a doubt. The boundary receiver position is interesting because I would argue that out of any position battle on the offensive side of the ball, it's the one that doesn't have that's probably going to be the guy, but we'll wait and see. Running back, it's probably going to be Aeneas, but let's see what push he gets from Kedron and Nolan James and the two freshmen. At tight end, a position we'll talk about here soon. Like, it's probably going to be Coop, but we'll see if he gets pushed. This one, it is truly wide open. Unlike, well, I don't want to say unlike, whereas the slot receiver position, one that we mentioned, also going through a position battle. But if healthy, it's probably going to be Jaden Greathouse, but Mylan Graham's performance in the spring vaulted him into the conversation of, hey, look, like Mylan Graham can also be your starting slot receiver in 2026. He showed that he's capable of making plays downfield, making catches over the middle of the field. He can play assignment correct football, and very similar to Greathouse, he has the talent to back it up. So that's going to be another one that's going to be interesting to track in fall camp, especially.
Yeah, I mean, so when you look at the receiver position, you need to get strong production from the boundary position, but it doesn't necessarily have to be volume. It needs to be like, hey, you're getting big play, you're getting some impact, you're getting good blocking. It doesn't necessarily have to be they caught 90 balls. I think when I look at the slot battle, I think this is a position where volume's going to matter a little bit more to me because of the makeup of Mike Denbrock's offense. We saw last year that you can catch 30-some passes and be an impact player in the boundary. Malachi Fields did not produce the way that I thought he was going to produce, and there's reasons why, but you look at him and say, that guy was a difference maker. He caught 30-some passes for 600 yards. When I look at the slot position and it's like it only caught 30-some positions, you're like, yeah, that's not good. That's not enough, because I look at how impactful that position was in 2024. I look at how impactful that position was for Mike Denbrock when he was at LSU. And even at times at Notre Dame. I mean, you think back to Amir Carlisle and Torrey Holt when they were playing that position for Notre Dame back in 2015. And so you're like, man, and that was with a guy like Will Fuller producing in the boundary. And they still went out and produced, and because it needs to produce. It needs to be a position where you get, some quality play. And now you look at Torrey Hunter Jr. and Amir Carlisle in 2015, they combined for 60 catches. And they combined for 718 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, not all of that was from the slot, because I know Torrey also played outside a little bit, but a good chunk of that was from the slot. And that's just what Mike Denbrock's offense kind of does. That's more of a volume position. And last year it was not. It was a complementary position. And so it needs to get back to being a volume position. And this battle is one that, to me, is impactful, because I see a world where, look, we're already seeing it on social media. We're already seeing them board. We're already getting I'm team Jaden Greathouse. I'm team Mylan Graham. And I'm like, screw that. I'm team both of them balling out. And then that way, if it's a hard battle, if it's hard to decide between Mylan and Jaden, that's a great problem to have, because it means they're both ready to play and help you, and they can both play outside. It doesn't have to be, okay, well, this guy won the battle, so this guy's not going to play anymore. There's going to be weeks where if Jaden Greathouse is starting, the matchup against the opponent is going to dictate that Mylan Graham needs to be a bigger part of the offense because they have a different skill set. There's going to be weeks where if Mylan Graham's a starter, if the coaches are smart, there's going to be matchups where it's like, dude, you need to maybe push the issue a little bit with Jaden Greathouse this week, because what he does well presents the opponent with a tougher matchup. And so that's why I'm hoping that this is a battle where they're both making plays. They're both dominating, because if they can do that, like you're already seeing it with just absurd comment. Like it's so frustrating to watch this position revolve into I'm team this guy, I'm team that guy. And then people just want to tear down Jaden Greathouse to hype up Mylan Graham. And I'm like, well, I could do the same thing to Mylan Graham and talk about how come when Carnell Tate was hurt last year, Mylan Graham didn't get any more touches if he was being blocked by Carnell Tate. But I have no interest in tearing down Mylan Graham, because we watched Mylan Graham this spring, and that dude's a ball player. So's Jaden Greathouse. That's the whole point. Catfish just nailed it. Notre Dame needs both of them. This needs to be a battle where Mylan and Jaden are both too good to play. So you got to figure out a way to have all three of them, including Jordan Faison, on the field. That's what I hope happens. Not, well, once it really got into the big moments, Mylan kind of faded. Or Jaden was hurt again, and, they didn't do this and didn't do this, or Jaden wasn't getting snaps and touches, which was the case last year. I don't want to see the nonsense we saw last year where you're pushing one of the slots and not the other, and one guy's going in a bunch of rundowns and the other guy's going in a bunch of throwing downs. I want to see you show that you can use both of them and use the skill sets for both of them. That's what I want to see from the coaches. But that also requires Jaden and Mylan both to go out there in fall camp and give them a reason, force them into that. That's what needs to happen. I don't want it to be a one or the other. I want it to be a both and. But it's going to be up to the players to force the issue. I don't think Mike Denbrock's going to be like, well, I know that this coach likes this guy more, and I'm going to ignore that. No, he's going to be like, hey, we're going to play both of those guys. And I don't think Mike Brown's in a world. I think Mike Brown had and we all have this as coaches. He had an opinion of Will Pauling that I don't think was appropriate, because there was such a great connection with him. He recruited the kid out of high school. He's you talk to anybody around the program, phenomenal young man. And as a coach, sometimes you can kind of get caught up a little bit in that, and maybe you think a guy's a little bit of a better player than he actually is. And so you push them more than maybe you should have. I think that happened last year a little bit. Now it's up to this year to say, hey, look, we're not going to get into that. We're going to play as many dudes as we can. And hopefully enough dudes present themselves. And that's why I think boundary's so important, Trev, or the slot's so important, Trev, because it was very obvious that this was missing from last year's offense. The things that Mike Denbrock really likes to do at the slot, we didn't see last year. And you want to see that back. And I think that Mylan Graham and Jaden Greathouse both have the skill to do those things. They have different skills, but they can both do the things that I think Mike Denbrock ultimately really, really likes in that offense. And so that's why I think it's imperative that this battle be the most competitive of the receiver battles. I think you can actually kind of, all the boundaries do well. Nobody plays great. I think you'd be okay. There's enough of a unique skill set. It's not ideal, but you can survive. This is a position where I think you need impact play.
Let's talk about the tight end position battle. And unlike other seasons, they're entering a year where they don't really have like an incumbent walking into the battle. In 23, it was like, okay, Mitch Evans is going to be the guy. Walking into 24, Eli Raridan was going to be the guy, walking to 25, Eli Raridan was going to be the guy. So I understood the level of confidence there. Notre Dame's tight end room this year is still very talented. And it's looking like Cooper Flanagan might be that dude. But the room is pretty open, and the level of talent in the room is forcing there to be a discussion of like, hey, maybe somebody does kind of overtake him for that tight end one spot, or, what is the pecking order behind him? All of those things are very fascinating.
I want to hear your thoughts on how this is going to shake out and why it matters.
Yeah, I mean, when you start looking at Notre Dame, it's outside of the, their tight end and they have all of this and bring this to the table. Notre Dame is in a position where they need top-level production from their tight ends back in the run and in the pass game. I think you're listening to two guys right now who are very confident that the run game will elevate from just the two Flanagans. Last year down on the goal line, we were seeing Matt Jeffrey and Jordan Faison lined up in a bunch slot to block the edge and seal the edge down on the goal line.
And it didn't work well.
No, it did not. And it's something that I do not think that you're going to see at all this upcoming season. With James Flanagan and Cooper Flanagan and Ty Washington and Ian Premer's presence and Jack Larson's presence, who's coming off of the best spring that he's had. But it doesn't negate the fact that they're walking into a time of the offseason where it's pretty open. We haven't seen any of them in a pretty big sample size. Even in 2024, we got to see Eli Raridan in bulk over the course of 16 games before he stepped into that role. Cooper Flanagan is coming off of a year that he missed entirely because he was coming back from an Achilles injury. James Flanagan started to play. It's one of those things where you wish that the 5-for-5 rule was passed before the 2025 season started. So we might have seen a little bit more of James Flanagan as a blocker. But all signs are pointing in a positive direction. Ty Washington is going into his second year with the offense. Jack Larson's coming off of his best spring, and they're bringing in one of the most talented tight end prospects they have in a while in Ian Premer. So when you start talking about what they need to do in the offense, it's elevating as a unit in the run blocking game, and then who emerges as an impact pass catcher.
I think that's an interesting one right there. And we'll talk more about that in the next segment, but I think that's going to be an interesting piece. I have no doubt the blocking is going to be there. I think we're going to see Flanagan in the run game. The question that I have is, what role does Ty Washington earn? And how can Ian Premer actually force his way onto the field?
Yeah.
That's a big question that I have. Very big question.
Yeah. That'll be huge. Or is it kind of like what we talked about before and similar to what you talked about with the slot receivers? Is it more matchup based?
Yeah. Which I'd be okay with.
Absolutely.
I would.
Yeah. I would as well.
Okay with that.
Yeah, I would as well. Let's talk about the offensive line, Brian. And at right guard specifically, I think that there is a battle going on, and it's not one that's caught a lot of the headlines. We've talked a lot about, what happens if Jags comes back from injury. That's a question that we can pose for when he actually does come back from injury. Mm-hmm. However, having said that, Matty Augustine's emergence in the spring kind of poses the question of what do? They are now at the spot where they can play the best five. Does Matty Augustine insert himself into that conversation as one of the best five? Does Sullivan Absher hang on to that spot? I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Look, Charles Jagasaw is not going to be a player we talk about as being in any position battles until we actually see he's going to be healthy enough to play. Otherwise, it's just there's so much uncertainty. Is he going to need another surgery or not? There's all these rumors flying around. And I'm just like, look, man, I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to chase those rumors down. We'll find out when we get to fall camp.
Right.
We'll find out. Is he healthy or not? So we'll address that at the time. For now, what we do know is that I do believe Sullivan Absher goes into fall camp as the starting right guard. I don't think this is necessarily a situation where like they don't feel comfortable with him and they're just praying somebody beats him out. I don't think it's that situation. I think there's more confidence in Sullivan Absher now than there was even when the season ended. And I think when you look at back how he played, somebody on the board asked me yesterday, what are strengths and weaknesses of Sullivan Absher? And I said, look, he does his job. I mean, that's the best strength I have is he just does his job. He doesn't dominate. He doesn't blow people off the ball. He doesn't like, oh my gosh, did you see how impressive he was on that play? Like we see from Herbie Lambert, he just does his job. And there's times like things he's got to work on, take better angles on some of your down blocks and, better footwork on some of your reach blocks when they're running mid zone, things like that. But like, he just kind of does his job. He gave up 2 pressures on 161 pass snaps last year, 2 pressures, no hits, no sacks. That's impressive. And to give you an example of that, remember how good Billy Schrauth was in pass pro in 2024? And he was even better this year. If you gave him the same Billy Schrauth and 360 some pass snaps in 2024, gave up 8 pressures. If you take what Sully did last year and you expand that to as many snaps as Billy Schrauth had in 24, he'd have given up 5 pressures. And it was like 4.8. I had to round up to get to 5. Now, I don't say that to say he's better than Billy Schrauth. I don't say that but it means is like, look, the proof is in the pudding. Name me a play where like, no, I don't know. He gave up a pressure. Nope. He just did his job. And there's something to be said for that. And so because he doesn't blow people off the ball and have those highlight blocks, I feel like there's this waiting on him to get beat out kind of conversation that's happening in the fan base. That's not where we are. I have full confidence that Sullivan Absher, if he's the starting right guard at Notre Dame in 2026, will be a steady factor in the offense. He could be like the Sam Mustipher of the 2017 offensive line. Didn't get the love of Q, didn't get the love of McGlinchey, didn't get the love of Alex Bars, but man, you were glad he was there just doing his job every snap, and that's what I think that Sullivan Absher can be for this offensive line. Having said that, you also can't ignore that there's a really talented player that the coaching staff is also high on that will get an opportunity with a strong fall camp to maybe earn at least a rotation spot or potentially beat Sullivan Absher out, whether that be fall camp, or if Sullivan struggles at some point in time in the season, and that's Matty Augustine. So it's an interesting conversation to have, Trev, because this is not a Sully's not good. And that's what I hear from people. He's not good, and I pray that so-and-so beats him out. And I don't feel that way. If Sullivan Absher is starts this year, I'm good at right guard. We've talked about this. But if he's not starting at right guard, that actually means not that he's not good. It's that whoever beats him out is about to be a dog at right guard. That's the difference. And that's where I think this debate that I see on the board and someone on social media about Sullivan Absher is kind of misguided. He's not some mediocre player waiting for somebody better to beat him out. It's if he gets beat out, it's because he's a good player. He showed that last year. He's a good football player. Is he an elite player? Hasn't shown that yet. Do I think he will be an elite player? He hasn't shown that yet. But if he gets beat out, it's either injury related or somebody else went off in fall camp, and we're about to see some nastiness on the right side of the offensive line. That's what I think this battle is about. And I think that Matty Augustine has done enough, especially in the run game, that I see that. Because I think there are some inside the program that would have no problem if Matty Augustine has to start at tackle. He's a good, solid tackle. But I think there's some in the program that believe that his best football might be at guard because he's a little tight-hipped. He's good in space, but not great in space. But what he is a mauler. And that at guard, he'd be better suited for that. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I think that's more of the framework of if he gets beat out, it's not because Absher's not a good football player. It's because somebody, and when you recruit the way that Notre Dame recruits on the offensive line, sometimes that happens. A good player got beat out by a potentially great player. I don't see that happening, but I think Matty Augustine deserves at least a conversation here about getting the opportunity where he could outperform Sullivan Absher, even though I speak for us because the two of us, because we've had this conversation, I'd be a little surprised if Sullivan Absher's not your starting right guard, because I don't think he gets enough credit for how good he was last season. Not a dominant player, but he just does his job every single snap at a pretty solid level. And that was in year one in his first 5 career starts. I mean, are we not even going to assume he's not going to get any better at all?
In an offseason where he spent half a spring at center. I mean, right. And he steps in.
Talking about the year before. Talking about the year before, right.
I mean, that's going to be the interesting thing. So I'm with you completely on where they're at with Sullivan Absher. If somebody beats him out, that means that they were able to do their job and play assignment correct football to the same degree that he did, but then was making more of the impact plays. They would absolutely be a dude. Now, where I think the wide open position battles are on the offensive line is somewhere in the 2 deep, because Notre Dame has consistently brought in high-level talent over the last couple of seasons. What I saw from guys like Grayson McHugh in the spring, if he continues to elevate his game and continues to find his footing throughout fall camp, wouldn't surprise me if some way through the season he winds up in the 2 deep. I also think about players like Joe Otting. Your backup center now has 6 career starts under his belt. He just got done writing his player profile, which is going to come out tomorrow morning. That's an invaluable piece to have. Now you enter the discussion of, can Joe Otting help you out in multiple places? We know that Matty Augustine is being considered by a lot of the coaching staff as, the next man in at multiple spots. Who else elevates their game to also be the next man in at multiple spots? So Matty Augustine might be able to hone in on competing at right guard a little more. What do we see from this true freshman class? Will Christopher Terrick remain healthy and make a push? It's all things like that. What do we see from Peter Jones? What steps does Styles Prescott make to fend off Grayson McHugh? So I think the 2 deep battle that we're going to see in fall camp throughout the rest of the season is going to be fascinating.
It's important too, Trevor, because as much as I would like to say, you know what, they're going to go into the season with Will Black and Anthony Knapp and Ashton Craig and Sullivan Absher and Gerby Lambert, and those 5 guys are going to play 15, 16 games together, and they're not going to get dinged up at all. I sure hope that happens.
Yeah.
Really hope that happens. But the reality is that's unlikely based on what we've seen for now several seasons. Notre Dame's had injuries on the offensive line, significant ones, every year going back to 2020. You think of 2020, you had Jarrett Patterson as your starting center. He got hurt. Then he gets replaced by Zeke Correll, and he gets hurt. Tommy Kramer also got hurt that season and missed games, I believe. 2021, Blake Fisher gets hurt in the first game of the year. He then gets replaced by Michael Carmody, and he gets hurt. Or was it Tosh first? I forget which one went first. And then Tosh Baker also started some games that year, and then he got hurt. You also had Zeke Correll go down with an injury that season. And you just actually go back to 2019 also. Remember, Robert Hainsey got his leg rolled up on against Virginia Tech in 2019. He went down for the season. 2022, same deal. We see injuries in 2022. That was actually one of the more healthy years in the offensive line. 23, we see Rocco Spindler go down with a season-ending injury. We see Zeke Correll go down with a season-ending injury. 24, we see Charles Jagasaw go down with a season-ending injury. Ashton Craig goes down with a season-ending injury. Billy Schrouth missed like 4 or 5 games in the regular season, and then Anthony Knapp gets hurt against Penn State, and he misses the championship game. Fortunately, you had a player like Charles Jagasaw ready to step in. We saw last year in the opener. You see Anthony Knapp, because of factors of conditioning, couldn't answer the bell at the end of the game against Miami. And that's been a rare thing for him in his career. Then you see Billy Schrouth go down again with a season-ending injury. A week before that, Ashton Craig goes down again with a season-ending injury. So based on history, there's a good chance you're going to need somebody to step into the starting lineup. So if you're only 5 deep at the offensive line, well, when that injury happens, you're going to be in trouble. So I think it's very important to focus on these battles for who's in the 2 deep on the offensive line, because based on history, there's a pretty good chance that somebody is going to have to start on the offensive line. Heck, even the Joe Moore Award-winning season, you had 6 different guys playing regularly on the offensive line because you had a rotation at right tackle. And so who wins those jobs? Is it the veterans who just kind of know what to do? Is it a younger player that's just too good not to have in your 2 deep? Those are all questions that I have about the battles that, hey, we know who the left tackle is going to be, but who's his backup? Is it Styles? Prescott? Is it Grayson McHugh? Who's the backup at left guard? Is it going to be Christopher Tarrick? Is it going to be just Matty Augustine's the backup everywhere? Well, what if you have two injuries like we've seen and Matty Augustine can only fill in for one of them? Is it Peter Jones? Is it Devin Houston? Does a freshman step up and look great? Is it bumping Joe Otting out to guard? Is it bumping Cam Herron out to guard? Is it like, who is that going to be? And I think we know who's probably going to start fall camp at those positions, but I don't think it's in a position where it's like, well, at least I hope that it's like these guys are there and they're going to stay there. If it happens because that's how it plays out, that's fine. But it's more so, that's not the issue. It's more of, if Joe Rudolph just says, hey, this is what the two deep is going to be, and I'm not really paying attention to fall camp. If he has that attitude, then that's not good. I don't think that he will. It's more of, I'm just hypothetically saying, if that's what he does, that's a problem. But if we're getting a situation, Trev, where it's like, okay, they had a legit battle and Styles played better than Grayson, or Devin outplayed Tyler Merrill or Ben Nichols or Joe Otting or Cam Herron, or Joe Otting played better than Cam Herron and Sullivan Garvin. That's really where you want to be. And that's actually more intriguing to me than necessarily right guard, because I feel like at right guard, it's like, you're going to be okay there no matter who starts. If it's Absher, you're going to be fine. If it's Matty Augustine, you're going to be fine. If Jagasol's healthy and able to go, you're going to be potentially fine. I'm still ready. I still want to say I want to see what he actually looks like as a football player now after all the injuries. But, obviously that's a perfect world situation. But, who knows? But it's, what's the two deep look like? That's something I'm fascinated by. And can this really talented freshman class make any impact at all in the two deep in one of two ways? One is so-and-so beat out Christopher Tarrick at right guard or left guard, or is it Christopher Tarrick is the backup left guard because he had the best fall of his career, and partly because he was getting pushed by Tyler Merrill and Peter Jones and Ben Nichols and Gregory Patrick, and you know what I mean? Styles Prescott has really elevated his game. He's ready to be the starter if Will Black goes down. Why? Because he responded to the Grayson McHugh challenge, worked his tail off, and he's playing the best football of his career. That's what you want to see. Either that or a freshman's just too good not to keep out of the two deep. Those are the things I want to see, and I think that could have a major impact on this team based on what we've seen every year for like the last 6 or 7 years, where somebody has had to step into the starting lineup, not just for like a half, but for stretches.
The last position battle that we're going to talk about today is the battle for quarterback 2. And it's in an interesting spot because unlike the other position battles that we talked about, where, you want to see Matty Augustine potentially force his way onto the field, or see one of Quincy Porter or Cam Williams or Micah Gilbert force their way on the field. This is one where I don't want to see the backup quarterback this season out of necessity. Really, quarterback and boundary corner are the only two position groups on the entire team that I don't want to see a player out of necessity. And that's how I feel about this. But this battle is more so positioning yourselves for the future. Which quarterback for 2026 gives you the best opportunity to get you out of a football game? Let's say if, knock on wood, Carr rolls his ankle, it's not severe enough that he's going to miss a lot of time, but he can't play the rest of the game.
Like Tommy Rees 2013 against USC.
Yeah, where Andrew Hendricks comes in and plays relief pitcher for a little bit, and then Tommy's back the next game. You know what I mean? I use the term relief lightly. But, or if it's a significant enough injury, do you have the same conversation that we had if, Riley Leonard went down long-term in 2024? Who steps in? Is it Angeli, or do they hand the keys over to Carr? All of those things are on the table. But what 2026 is going to do in the remainder of this offseason is kind of almost serve as a benchmark for the future. That doesn't mean that whoever wins the QB2 job is going to just be the starter whenever Carr leaves, but there's a lot of talent to work with. You have the oldest guy in the room, Blake Hebert, which is a redshirt freshman, and then you bring in two true freshmen in this class, and Noah Grubbs and Teddy Girard. The interesting thing about this battle is there's no quarterback entering that has played not even one collegiate snap of football. Every other backup for quite some time at Notre Dame is, Drew Pine got snaps in 2020. Steve Angeli got snaps in 2021 or 22. I'm thinking that Tyler Buckner was the rotated in quarterback in 2021. So there has been some level of experience at the QB2 spot for Notre Dame since Marcus Freeman's arrival in South Bend. They're not going to have that this season. who emerges as the guy that shows the coaching staff, despite never being in a game-like situation, who emerges as
being in a game.
In a game. Yeah, not even game-like situation, just in a game. Who emerges out of the pack is, yeah, we have confidence in this guy to go in and either get us out of a game or win us a couple of games. And I think that's fascinating about this battle.
Yeah, there's not a lot more I can add to this one, Trev. It is really the biggest unknown on offense, and it's an unknown that we hope we don't have to find the answer to this season. Because who you are, who wins the number 2 job this year does not necessarily say who's going to be the number 1 guy next year. Gives you a leg up, helps you go into fall. I mean, Steve Angeli took the first rep in spring practice in 2024 or 2025 spring, but I think we all kind of had an idea that that's not ultimately who we think is going to win the job. But it gave him that opportunity, and if Steve would have gone out there and just played above his level a little bit, then maybe he could have held off CJ and Kenny. He didn't, but you kind of always expected that because there was more talent behind him. And I think we could see that this year. But I think Blake Hebert could be that guy. I think one of the 2 freshmen could be that guy. I really don't know who. They all have strengths. They all have legitimate weaknesses, and beyond just the unknown of we don't know what they can or can't do in a game situation. You hope we don't have to find the answer out, Trev, to your point. But yeah, absolutely, this is going to be a very intriguing battle. And look, this is going to get talked. Sadly, this is, barring injury, this is the least important of all the quarterback battles for this season, for the position battles for this season. But I promise you it'll be the one most talked about once we get to fall camp. And it's even worse because we're not going to have very many practice availabilities, and I think we only get like 1 full practice in fall camp. So there's not going to be a lot. So it's just going to get talked about ad nauseum. It's going to be rumors and speculation and all this other kind of stuff. And people nitpicking like what we see in the very few opportunities that we see. It's just going to happen. It'll get talked a lot about, but hopefully it's the one that matters the least, because that means CJ Carr's healthy all year. And then we can spend all next spring having a conversation about who that next guy might be, assuming CJ goes pro, which I've said again, I'm not opposed to CJ Carr going pro, because if it goes pro, that means he had a brilliant season. And if he has a brilliant season, it means Notre Dame's going to be really, really good.
Oh, yeah.
Really good.
Brian, let's talk about the changes that we want to see on the Notre Dame offense here in the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And I said at the start of the previous segment, it's interesting that we talk about an offense who set program records last year in yards per play and points per game. They return a quarterback that shattered the program record for passer rating. Yet there's things that we can still look at to say, if they change these things and make some of these adjustments, this unit can elevate to another level. That gives you guys a window in of how good this unit can truly be. Now, we've kind of split the changes we want to see into 2 different buckets. There's personnel changes and there's schematic changes. And personnel changes doesn't mean bench this guy and start this guy. That's the change that I want to see. That's not the type of stuff that we're talking about. We're talking deeper rotations. But we're going to talk about the changes we want to see on offense and why we'd like to see them. Because we do believe that there's another level that this offense can achieve, which is really exciting considering what they've already done up to this point under Mike Denbrock.
Yeah, these are tweaks because, again, you're talking about a team that was the number 2 scoring offense in the country last year, a team that was number 2 in yards per play last year, a team that, I mean, look, did the offense do enough to beat Miami? No. The offense did, however, go out there and score 34 points against Texas A&M at home and put up 429 yards on the field of offense up and 6.0 yards per play. Not in elite. Oh my gosh, what a brilliant performance. But like, dude, you beat them by 10 the year before with 23 points, right? You lost that game because your defense primarily. I mean, your offense goes right down the field and scores a touchdown to put you up 40-34 with a couple minutes left, right? The offense did better. And even the 24 points against Miami is better than what some other teams, what they've done in the past against some of those really, really good teams offensively. And it's more than what you scored against Ohio State the year before. It's more than what you scored against Northern Illinois. It's more than what I mean, there's a lot of games you're like, yeah, it's more than what you've seen in the past. It's more than what they scored against, Clemson in 2018. It's more than what they scored against Alabama in ever under Brian Kelly. It's more than what they scored in their win over Georgia. Certainly more offensive points than they scored in their win over Georgia. And so, but it still wasn't good enough because you were part of the reason they had 27 also. You think of the fumble, the Malachi Fields fumble when they're coming out, that sets up a field goal opportunity. You think of the interception that led to a field goal. So it wasn't good enough in that game. No spin about that. It just wasn't good enough. But it was better in some of the bigger games than it has been. But it needs to be better. And it can be better. And better isn't about score more points, have more yards per play. It just means overall, it means about what can you do for this offense to be even more efficient and more explosive and more dependable in some of the bigger moments than they even have been under Mike Denbrock, who has raised the bar significantly. In 2 short years, he's raised that bar quite a bit.
Let's dive into some of the changes and some of the tweaks, like you mentioned, that we want to see on offense. And the first one up here is about the wide receiving room. And what we don't want to see is a repeat of last year, where the receiver rotation was very shallow. You have the talent this year, you have the depth this year, and at certain spots you have the experience. You want to see a deeper wide receiver rotation this fall.
Now, just so we're clear, I want to set the stage here with people. When we talk about these changes, these are not improvements. This won't be like be better on third down, be better in the red zone. These are more foundational things that lead to success in certain areas. It won't be score more points. It won't be more yards. It won't be more yards per play, higher completion percentage, whatever. These are things that lead to those improvements. This is about changes that lead to being better, and then being better results in whatever statistical deficiency we might think that they have. I just want to clear that, because I think I can already anticipate some of the responses, and just like genuinely good responses about, hey, they got to get better on third down. They got to get better in the red zone. They got to get better at finishing near the goal. Those are all things are true, but these are things we believe can lead to that. And you talk about wide receiver, Trev, this is twofold. Number one is you as coaching staff have to say, who are our most talented players and what can we do to push them as much as we can to try to get the most out of them. And then it's up to the players to say, hey, I got to put in the work this summer. I got to have the focus in fall camp. I got to make the plays in fall camp to put myself in position to say, you have to play me. Because again, I don't think that Notre Dame is opposed to playing a deeper receiving core. I mean, we saw this in 2015. There were 5 guys that played a lot for Notre Dame in 2015 and got touches. We talk a lot about how good, Will Fuller was, but he was great. But you had 48 catches and 597 yards out of Chris Brown. You had 28 catches for 363 yards out of Torrey Hunter Jr. You had 32 catches for 355 yards from Amir Carlisle. You had 16 catches for 200 yards for Corey Robinson that season. So, we've seen years, Trev, where the production at the position has been not just 1 or 2 guys. And to a degree, we also saw it in 2014 with Mike Denbrock, where you had Will Fuller had 76 catches and over 1,000 yards. Chris Brown had 39 and 548. Corey Robinson had 40 and 539. CJ Prosise, as a receiver, had 29 for 516. That's 4 receivers with over 500 yards receiving with Mike Denbrock as the receivers coach and the offensive coordinator. And that wasn't it. You also had Amir Carlisle, who had 23 catches for 309 yards. So we've seen it before, and with this particular coach. So I don't think he's like against. I don't think it's a thing where Mike Denbrock's like, I am only going to play 4 receivers. It's just, if I'm going to play you, I need to trust that you can be that guy. I need to trust that you can go out there and dominate. Sometimes they've had a shorter bench because my number 1 and number 2 are Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr.
Sure.
And I'm not taking them off the field. I don't think that's the case as much this year. So the players got to give them a reason to do it. But at the same time, the coaches have to make sure that they create an environment that gives players the opportunity and the coaching and the push and the direction that you're earning your job as a position coach by coaching these kids up. I'm not saying Mike Brown has or hasn't done that. I'm simply saying this is what he needs to do in 2026. Because I think they need to, yes, it's good for players to prove it, but I think you need to also create an environment where you're trying to enhance the opportunities for there to be a deeper rotation. And then also, when you have a deeper rotation, it's not just guys coming in to give Jordan Faison a breather. Those guys are coming onto the field and they're getting a chance to make plays as well. Where you can get into a situation where, hey, we played 6 receivers. Yeah, but you ran the ball 14 out of 15 times when that kid was on the field, which didn't hurt you in game 3. But by the time you get to November 7th, Miami will have scouted that, and they will know that when you go with this kid on the field, you are not throwing to that kid, which makes it a whole lot easier for Corey Heatherman to put a game plan together, knowing you're not going to throw to that kid. And so those are things that we're talking about here.
Whoever forces the issue is going to be in a good position to play this year. The kind of the next step to a wide receiver forcing their way into the rotation and forcing the coach's hand to say, like, look, this guy's just too good not to play, is we also want to see more wide receivers moved around this year in the offense. Not so much last year where it was like, Malachi Fields was just in the boundary. Will Pauling was just your slot receiver. Jordan Faison was just your field receiver. Now, to counter, more wide receivers, to the first point, have to force the issue to earn more playing time. But one way that you figure out a way to get Mylan Graham, Jordan Faison, and Jaden Greathouse all on the field at the same time is to move them around to different spots. That's something that we want to see as well. And that's something we've seen Mike Denbrock do at previous spots before. Malik Neighbors was not just the slot receiver for LSU in 2023. Brian Thomas Jr. was not just the boundary receiver for LSU under Mike Denbrock. So that's how I view this one. Agree.
And that's going to be a big part of this, Trev, is really looking at it from the standpoint of, do the players present themselves in a way, and do they have an opportunity to present themselves in a way to force their hand on that? Because we have seen it. We've seen them do that. And here's another one along those same lines, Trev, is I want to see the number 2 tight end be more of a factor in the pass game. And there's 2 reasons why. One is, I think that, again, if you run a lot of 12 personnel and your backup tight end has 5 targets all year, then you've now told teams you really only have to defend those 2 receivers and that 1 tight end. You don't have to worry about that guy. They may throw him a little crosser route or something like that every now and then, but they're not going to do it. It forces, people to step up and say, hey, you're going to have to make plays in this regard. Or you're going to have to defend this guy because he can make plays. The other reason why is because I do think you're in a situation where, even if Cooper Flanagan is everything that we think he can be, I don't think there's this giant gap where he's number 1 and everybody else is lower. I want to see different guys on the field, because sometimes your number 2 tight end is your number 1 tight end because he's getting a breather. But if you're not throwing to him when he's on the field the way you do your number 1, then once again, it's a tell that maybe Wisconsin and Rice and Purdue, Michigan State, Purdue don't figure out, but I promise you BYU and Miami will have figured that out. SMU will have figured it out. And certainly when you get to the postseason and you're playing the Georgias, the Ohio States, the Oregons, the Texases, and teams like that, they will have figured that out. And those little things can be a difference, to advancing or not when you get into the postseason.
I agree. The number 2 tight end absolutely needs more involved in the passing game. I mean, I talked about 2019 earlier in the show, referencing the Notre Dame running back rotation. I'm going to go back to 2019 and talk about what Tommy Tremble's impact was. I mean, he only had 16 receptions. 4 of them went for touchdowns, but he was the number 2 tight end behind Cole Kmet. They have to be a more viable option in the pass game, because if they're not, it's a very, very, very easy tell of what happens when they go 12 personnel. I'm with you entirely. Absolutely.
Just makes it a little easier to defend.
Yep.
Which says a lot about how good they've been. And I'm not saying the number 2 tight end has to be like 1A, 1B. It doesn't have to be like that. It just means, like, look, you let the guy go out there and catch 10 to 12 balls over the course of a season. All of a sudden, teams have to kind of look at him a little bit differently and say, man, that guy was a factor. Like you had to keep your eye on him. Otherwise, you might get beat. And that's kind of where I'm coming from on that. Vince or Trev, it's just got to be a thing where teams just can't ignore that guy. And if they do, you make them pay for it. Because I've seen it to where teams won't defend the number 2 tight end, and Notre Dame doesn't do anything to make them pay for it. And that's what's got to change. And that's just not under Mike Denbrock. That's just been true a lot of times. It's just when you have 5 eligible receivers on the field, make sure people have to defend all 5. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be true on every player. You can go max pro. But, like, what I mean is just where the game plan is such that, like, hey, this guy is not going to get the football. And we know that as a defense. He's not going to get the football. And then you have that one game against that one team that you use that against that one team, but then it's right back to it. And it doesn't matter.
Let's broaden the scope a little bit and talk big picture on offense, some of the things that we would like to see. And that's mixing up the tempo a little bit more. Now, we've talked and gone on record before in the show about, hey, look, this doesn't have to look like 2010 Oregon, where every offensive possession has to last a minute 45. but keeping defenses honest, keeping them on their toes more, and you now have the speed and the top level athletes to switch up your tempo. I think that would benefit the Notre Dame offense.
Yeah, and when I say this, and I've talked about this for a long time, I don't mean this like it's like 50-50 between normal tempo and up-pace tempo. There's going to be games where it's just not needed.
Yep.
You didn't need it against Purdue last year. I just like having it as something that you just do where sometimes you maybe come out and say, look, we really want to get off to a fast start. We want to put this team on our heels. And we think when we come into this game, we can put that team on our heels by just kind of upping the tempo a little bit. And the reason I like it early in games is because early in games, you can do it off of your script, which means now a script is like okay, here's the first 15 plays we're doing. I don't know what Notre Dame script is, but I do believe they have one. And you practice a little bit more. It's the things you practice a lot on Tuesday, and it's things that you'll do on Thursday, and it's things that you'll do. You'll do a set segment on here's our opening script, and we run the script, and then you kind of walk through those things on Friday a little bit, and you have a sense of here's what we're doing. Well, when you're doing those things, it allows you to say, hey, we can do the tempo here because everybody knows what's coming to a greater degree. And we know what we're running, and we can put this team on their heels a little bit. And so that's where it's a good time to do that. And then they're always wondering, like, is this the drive that Notre Dame kind of ramps it up? I think there's a time and a place where you can kind of push the tempo a little bit. And it doesn't have to be like, where again, you're Oregon 2010. And it might be a thing too, where you come out, you run the ball the first time, and then you say, hey, look, we're going to come out, we're going to get on the tempo, and if we complete that pass, and we're going to keep going. And you throw an incomplete pass, you get back in the huddle, and you run your offense. I just think there's advantages with the speed that they have, with the quarterback that they have, that if they can just do that as just a mix-up every now and then, they can really get teams on their heels, which creates more uncertainty. It forces teams to kind of sometimes be a little bit more vanilla. Now they have to practice against your tempo more, be ready for that tempo more. And it just gives you, it can be the difference between you scoring 24 points against Miami and 31 points against Miami, because you got that one drive where you caught them on their heels, and on the fourth play you throw. They're now calling, and you run a quick trap or a quick misdirection to your running back, and he gashes them for a big play, and it sets up a score. Those things can be the difference between winning and losing against the better teams on your schedule. And it's not something you can only do against those games. Like it's got to be something that you do a little bit more consistently. But you got to have the right quarterback for it. And I don't know that necessarily doing it. I mean, we talked about it last year, but I don't think I harped on it as much as I had in the past, because you had a first-year starter at quarterback. And I think there were times I was like, hey, I think this might help him a little bit, but you had to be real careful with it. Now it's like, hey, you got a veteran there. Now you can definitely do it and have success with it.
Especially with how much they were willing to put on his plate already as a redshirt freshman in the starting lineup. I'm with you completely. Let's talk about the Notre Dame run game. And we would like to see a little bit more creativity with how they design specific plays. Specifically, they need more run schemes that hit on the outside. And that's something that you and I had talked about before the show started, something that we talked about when you put up that run game breakdown. There are some things that Notre Dame has the ability to do this year, especially with a more physically talented overall offensive line than what they've had in years past. Be very interested to see if they mix some of that in.
So Notre Dame's run game is very effective, but when I look at it last year, I really think a lot of its effectiveness had more to do with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price than it did consistently great game planning and execution and great blocking. It was good. It wasn't. You don't have the success you have in spite of the play calling and the coordinator and the offensive line. But it's like if you put a different back there, it's not as good as it was either. And sometimes significantly so. And I don't know that people quite understand how much was about how just the insane ability of the backs was. And I think they're getting a better sense when you see Jeremiah Love go number 3 overall and Jadarian Price goes number, in the first round, he's the second back taken. One of the issues I had is everything was way too downhill. Like their tight zone, duo, counter were all downhill A-gap runs that look similar. Their version of stretch was mid-zone. Like that was their kind of like that to them is like toss crack for other teams, right? And I understand. I like a downhill run game, and I don't want an east-west run game, but I do think they need to do two things. Number one is they need to do some things that are hitting outside. It could be jet sweeps. It could be toss. It could be, a true stretch, which I think maybe do something a little bit quicker. I think mid zone kind of gives you the stretch play that you're looking for. Maybe something where you're kind of doing a pin and pull and trying to get outside. That's a little bit of a change up than what you do. They did a little bit of that with Audric Estime. So I know it's in Joe Rudolph's wheelhouse. And I think that I understood why they focus more on the inside zone and duo and mid zone with the backs they had last year, because you just want to get them the ball and let them cook. But I think you got to scheme things up a little bit more this year. And the reason I like this is not just that it gives them more opportunities to make plays, but it's also something where teams could just I got to focus on the box against this run game. That's it. I don't got to worry about anything hitting quick. Everything is going to be kind of either right at me or a mid zone. And that's why you saw some of the better defenses were able to slow it down. I mean, they ran, I think I counted, I have to look it up. Actually, I'm going to look up the run game, but like the number of mid zone that we saw against A&M was like, dude, no wonder they were able to kind of slow it down. They knew what was coming. Like there was no variety whatsoever to what they were doing. And I just felt that it took away from your ability to kind of use scheme and use, different looks and things like that to keep them on their toes, which then opens up some bigger plays in the mid zone and other aspects of it. Yeah. They ran mid zone 29 times. They had 36 overall carries. 29 of them were mid zone. You had 2 quarterback wraps, 2 buck sweeps, and 2 guard wraps. And so the buck sweep gets outside, but it's kind of like, it can't be 29-2. That's my thing. The other part of it too is, Trevor's, I think that some of your downhill runs need to change. And the biggest one for me is counter. Notre Dame's counter play is a straight step A gap and get vertical play. And I think you lose all it's just not a play that's been effective for Notre Dame. And I think what happens is when you run it that way, you lose a lot of what makes counter effective, because teams can just squeeze it and funnel it downhill. And when you look at the production last year, so this is on the Notre Dame message board, you can find this. Notre Dame averaged 6 yards a carry on counter last year, but they were only 48.6 efficiency, meaning it was a win for the offense. And part of the reason that they were the 6.0 yards per play is because they had a couple big gains, including the 56-yard touchdown against Pitt. And I hate to be that guy that's like, well, if you take out that one play, but we're talking about 36 other carries. They only averaged 4.6 yards a carry. That one play boosted it. That can be misleading. Well, of course, if you take away the best play, but that's why I think the efficiency number is so important, because when you look at that, you're like, holy moly. Notre Dame, 57.9% efficiency on mid zone, 62.9% on duo. So duo and counter had the same exact yards per carry, but duo was over 62% efficient and counter was 48.6. Outside zone, 63.3, but they only ran it 30 times and it kind of looks like mid zone. So the success of that play was bad. And that's something that's got to change. They ran sweep and toss crack 4 times. They ran outside zone, but again, outside zone is a handoff, downhill, off tackle run. It's not something that gets outside quickly. They just didn't have that last year. And so I think what you can do with counter is that can be something that changes the eye discipline of the linebackers, because the aiming point and the footwork for the back on duo and inside zone and tight zone is not a lot different than it is on counter. So you're trying to kick and pull, and the back is just opening and running right behind it. Well, when defenses see that, they're just going to squeeze down on it from the edge and flow to it. Where what made counter so effective in the past under center, again, this is under center, is you're having your back go one way to set up the timing, and then he comes back. Sometimes, you'd get a slight pause from the linebackers because they're so used to when you step, it's inside zone this way, and then now you're bringing counter back this way. Just enough of a pause to set up good leverage for the linemen to get to their blocking angles. But when you're just opening play side and going right downhill, it hits way too fast, and it's another run that the play side is to the side the back is lined up to a lot of the times, and it times up poorly. The backs get downhill way too fast, and it's hard for them to make blocks off of that. And that's one of the things that I think made the touchdown run against Pitt so effective, is because for whatever reason, Jeremiah Love just got downhill slower. And that had a big impact on why that play worked. And a lot of the times the timing on that play was just not good, Trev. And until they fix that, it's going to continue to be a problem for Notre Dame, where the counter is just not an effective counter. Because, to me, counter is called counter because it's literally meant to counter your other runs. It's a mix-up of what you're doing in other situations where you may be more of, your back steps here, and when he takes that opening step, that's where the play is going. Well, then there's other times where the back steps a certain way, and now he's coming backside. It allows your blocks to set up and allows your timing to set up. And you just didn't see enough of that, in my opinion, from Notre Dame last year when they ran counter. And I complained about it a lot during the year, where the counter play just doesn't time up well. And my hope is that they will take a peek at that and say, hey, we got to time this up a little bit better. Let the blocking set up a little bit more. Try to get them moving this way, and then the back can then hit. It can still be an A-gap run. I'm okay with it being an A-gap run, but it just hits way too quick, and everything is too tight, and it's why it's just not an overly effective play. And let's be honest, the 56-yard, it was blocked up perfectly, that play. And you still needed Jeremiah Love to make a ridiculous spin move at 5 yards to even make it go beyond 5 yards. And counter should set up more seams than that. But it's just the way it's designed, not from a blocking standpoint, more from a back footwork standpoint, and more from a leverage standpoint. Even if something as simple as put the backside, and even if he just takes a delay step, it doesn't have to be a full jab. I think it could work out of a jab, but just something where sometimes a jab step is not, I'm trying to get the linebackers to fly this way. It's a timing mechanism. It's like when I coached running backs in 2002 at Muhlenberg, we had an All-American back. We ran a mess out of inside zone to counter. In inside zone, it was very clear out of under center. You got to open, cross, and then get downhill. Why? Because if you open and then just got downhill, you'd get downhill too quickly. The blocking doesn't go. If you open, cross, another step, then get downhill, you are getting to the aiming point or the hole too late. The hole's now closed. It's a timing mechanism. And right now, there is no real timing mechanism. It's like open and then go. And so even when you delay it, so to speak, I shouldn't say there isn't a timing mechanism. The timing mechanism isn't effective because he's coming right downhill. I think something where you're having to step and then maybe work a little laterally, then get inside. Because the other thing too is you're trying to run downhill inside of a kick out block. So you're coming from the call side. So like when you look at, I'm going to pull it up here and make sure that I'm correct on this, because I think I remember it this way. The touchdown run against Pitt, Jeremiah came from backside on that one. A lot of times they'll come front side, but by coming backside, he was a little bit more delayed. But even then, it's like it just happened so quick that he has to make like an initial move. He almost runs into James Flanagan in the backfield. He has to kind of make a move off of James Flanagan. And that's kind of why I say, Trev, it's like, it's just not timing up well. Pitt's an aggressive defense, and Pitt, gets downhill, and they were able to kind of wash everybody down. And then Jeremiah makes a sick move and outruns everybody for a big play. The timing of it just doesn't work. And that's a change I think needs to happen, because if they can get counter to work more efficiently, man, like that's a great look, in my opinion, for Notre Dame to be effective. It really can. And that's another run game change that I want to see. There's a lot of things they do well. I'm not like, you got to run 37 different. If all you do is mid zone, tight zone, sight zone, do the kind of same thing, counter, give me a couple toss cracks or buck sweeps or something like that. And, maybe give me a jet motion. Maybe you don't even have to give it every game, but just give me some stuff that just really forces that's like 6 runs And then you run them from different, you don't need a bunch of stuff. You don't need 9 different, 12, 15 different run concepts. You just need to, the stuff you do needs to look a little bit different, and it has to complement each other better than what we've seen, and not just mid-zone counters duo. That's more effective because you had elite backs than necessarily like it did anything to impact the defense. And that's something I'd like to see change a little bit.
Let's switch gears and talk the Notre Dame passing game here, Brian. Obviously, they're poised to have a better season. We've talked a lot about the depth and the talent overall in the room. CJ Carr returns as a preseason Heisman favorite by FanDuel and ESPN and a bunch of different outlets to be the Heisman winner this season. Obviously, it's still very early. One of the things that would go a long way in having that happen is more vertical stretch concepts, not so heavy on horizontal stretches, meaning Notre Dame does a lot to work sideline to sideline. And obviously before they've had the speed to go sideline to sideline. Now your receiving core is very much more, I don't know the best phrasing for this, more vertically oriented, I guess you could say. When you have additions like Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham and Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert, Jaden Greathouse, you talked about how there was a lack of emphasis with the slot receiver in certain concepts that we like to see. Slot fade was a big part of Notre Dame's offense in 2024 when Jaden Greathouse was healthy on a week-to-week basis, whereas now it's not really as much in 25 with Will Pauling in there. Not a slight to him. It's just different when you're running that concept to a receiver that's 5'10" versus 6'1", 6'2". Mm-hmm. Those are some things that we would like to see as well.
So let's just real quick give you guys a very rough demonstration here, the difference between horizontal stretch and vertical stretch, because what's ironic is your 4 verts play is a horizontal stretch. So here's basically what it means. So this is 4 verts, okay? Very general idea. It's a play that Notre Dame runs a ton. This is a horizontal stretch because you're stretching the defense horizontally. Even though these are considered vertical routes, you're not threatening the defense vertically, you're threatening them across. And then Notre Dame does a lot of stuff off of this. They run option routes. They'll run an ISO dig route. They'll run comebacks. They'll run hitches. Even the slot fade is a little bit more of a vertical stretch, but it's still kind of a horizontal stretch. Then you have a play like this. So it's not so much about the design of the play, it's how you're affecting the defense. Then you have a play like this. This is an old school play. So this is a high-low concept. So you're getting a crosser from the slot, same alignment. You're getting a dig route there by number 2 and then a post over top of it. So what you're doing is you're attacking the defense vertically. So the threat is vertical. So what happens with a lot of the horizontal stretch stuff is they essentially run a lot of ISO routes. It's this route versus that defender. And then you're reading the defenders to see who you're going to go through. What I like about vertical stretches is not only are you're still isolating defenders and you still can create matchup opportunities, but what you're doing is you're now kind of getting a more of a two-way type of read, where we're going to ISO this linebacker, and what he does is going to determine whether we throw the crosser or the dig behind it or the over behind it, things along those lines. And I think it's just another way to influence the defense, and it's another way to kind of help them prepare for things. I think the fact that Notre Dame is so much a sort of a horizontal stretch, everybody's kind of running their route deep offense, it puts a lot more on the receivers to go make plays and your quarterbacks to make big throws. Now, they run some vertical stretch stuff. They run some mesh. They run some high lows, but they don't run it a whole lot. And I don't think they run it is enough to really where it's really threatening the defense. And I don't think they run it enough to where the quarterbacks are overly comfortable reading it. I was watching a play last night. I'm trying to remember what game I was watching. I think it was the A&M game. So it could have been early in CJ's tenure, but like he's got a crosser route coming across and he's got an over route behind it and then a comeback route by Jordan Faison. And he's kind of booting out and he just doesn't look comfortable finding that over route, the backside over route, which was coming wide open. And he throws the comeback to Faison, and it wasn't a bad read, but it's like you could tell there was no concept of CJ Carr looking for that backside over route. And I just think things like that, it's another stressor on the defense. Here's the other thing it does, Trev. A lot of those routes are routes that get the ball to the receivers more on the run. And the one thing about the Notre Dame defense is they'll do that at times. And we saw that with some of the outside go routes and the post routes, but not a lot of what Notre Dame does gets receivers the ball on the move. Think through Jordan Faison's season. Good speed, really elusive. How many times did Jordan Faison catch the ball on the run compared to the times he's catching a stop, a comeback, a quick out to the sideline, or a jump ball down the field? There's not a lot. Now, he did it, right? I mean, we could go back and point to the post route he caught for a big play against Purdue a couple years ago. He caught the go route for a touchdown against Purdue this year. Right? Not Purdue, Indiana 2 years ago. The post route in the playoff game for a big play. And there's times we've seen it, but it's a lot of what he does is him catching the ball and he's stationary. It means he's got to make somebody miss, or if somebody's, uncovered. And I want to see more things where we're getting Jordan Faison on the ball on the move. Pivot routes, reverse pivots, crossers, overs, digs, things where he's moving, catching the ball on the run. And that's something I want to see as well. He needs to be doing that. Mylan Graham needs to be doing that. Jaden Greathouse needs to be doing that at times. And even your backs, your big guys can do some of that stuff. That's something I want to see more of is, look, I got no problem with horizontal stretch plays. I honestly, if I was coaching in Notre Dame and Mike Denbrock was like, Drisk, we're going to put in the pass game you want. First pass concept I put in is go, all verts. The very first pass concept I put in is all verts, horizontal stretch. Because it's the foundation of everything else that I do. Meaning everything needs to look like a go route. Everything needs to look like 4 verts for the first 3 steps, with the exception of, certain routes if you're running a crosser. But even then, there's times you can do certain things. A dig route needs to look like a seam until you break it off. Comeback needs to look like a go route until you break it off. And so your body language, your release, your urgency, all that needs to look like a go route. But then it's like you got to have other things that goes at people. And that's something that I want to see more from this receiving core this year is give me more. You've got, and part of it, you got a different type of receivers. And so some of this is like, I understood kind of why you did it last year. And this year it's like, well, it's different now. You have Faison, Greathouse, Mylan Graham, Elijah Burris, Cam Williams. There's more, Bubba Frazier. There's just more guys on the roster now that are catch and run guys than you had last year. And I don't even think Will Pauling was a catch and run guy. He was, even at Wisconsin, he was a, short, work open on options and, stops and things like that. Like he wasn't a guy that you were necessarily going to say, hey, let's get him in space and do these type of things with him. So still build around the horizontal stretches. I just want to see more of those vertical stretch concepts and those getting guys the ball on the run concepts that we just haven't seen enough of at Notre Dame in the last couple seasons. I just want to see more of that. That's another change that I would make.
Yeah, one of the most underrated parts of Jaden Greathouse's game is his abilities after the catch. A lot of people point to what he did against Ohio State, which is very valid. But one of the games that I thought he was great after the catch was Florida State in 2024. He caught a lot of screens, tunnel screens on the move. He was a lot of now screens, and he was very, very effective. So I'm with you completely. That would definitely be top of mind for me.
Like even the way they run slants are kind of like throw it to a spot and expect contact, not like, drive off and get a guy on the run. Enough of that. Like we saw second half against Ohio State when they were down, we saw him catch a ball on an over route for a big play. We saw him run a reverse pivot to try to get him ISO and catch on the run. Like we know they have it and they've had success with it at times, but it's just, we need to see more of it, especially to Faison, especially to Mylan Graham. Greathouse is always going to do some stuff that's just kind of like, dude, it's you versus that guy on a slot fade. That's great because he's awesome at it. But even there's some areas where it's like, hey, let me kind of get into this.
Any other changes on the offensive side of the ball, Brian? Because I know that we're talking about a unit that was so efficient last year, and they were as explosive as we'd seen them in quite some time. But now with changing of the guard and with CJ Carr kind of being the driver of success, not so much the 2 running backs. Any other changes that you want to see?
I think a lot of it, Trevor, is just you don't need to remake your offense. Be who you are. This is who Mike Denbrock is. This is what made his offense so good all these years. And he's done a great job of adapting to the personnel that he has. The pass offense he used with Will Fuller and Chris Brown and Amir Carlisle and Torrey Hunter looked a lot different than the pass offense he used when he had, Bo Collins and Jaden Harrison and Jaden Greathouse, as his primary pass catchers. And so that's one of the things I love about Mike Denbrock. And I think some of the stuff I expect to see from him this year because of what I think he'll do to adapt to the personnel. But some of it is, I do think he's always been a guy that really likes the horizontal stretch stuff. And I do as well. There's a lot I do off horizontal stretch when I was a pass game coordinator, but it's like with anything, you have to mix it up. I'm more and here's the funny thing. I'm more of a horizontal stretch guy than I am a vertical stretch guy, but the stuff that you're using for vertical stretches is meant to get guys the ball in the run and then to create ISOs against a specific defender, which is what you're also trying to do, against, and sometimes it can be different. Like, so I was talking about this play earlier right here, this crosser, like, well, am I trying to ISO this safety in a too high where if he comes here, I'm banging the post, or if he drops back, then I got that dig the cross combination. Like, you're still creating ISOs, but you're doing it in a different way that threatens defenders in a completely different manner. And it goes back to the run game stuff. It's do things that put more on the defense to have to prepare for. And one thing I love about Mike Denbrock's offense is he doesn't have a million plays in it. And I've heard people try to criticize him like, well, we knew what was coming. Well, then why didn't you stop it? Well, because he knows when to call things. And even if he only has 8 pass concepts in a game, which he has more than that, if he knows exactly when to call them against certain looks, then it doesn't matter. He doesn't need 75 pass plays in. I'm simply saying that, and the players are good at the things that he asked them to do, very good at it. I think that's a compliment, not an insult, in this era where more somehow means better. We run a million plays, we must be better. Yeah, well, your million plays didn't score as many points or as go for many yards or rack up as this and do that as that offense that didn't do all those things. I just think there are some things that he could alter the offense a little bit in a way that just makes those things even more effective, but then also accents the talent that he's going to have in the room this year. And that's, yeah. And somebody said this, I admit he gets very predictable at times. I don't think it's predictable. I don't, because if it was predictable, like the defense would be able to see it, prepare for it, and stop it and, shut it down. Like I've always said, Trev, I don't care if you know my game plan. I care if you know when I'm going to call it. It's like when you study film, you know everything that a team is going to do, basically. What I don't know is when you're going to do it. That's why the cheating scandal at Michigan was so important. They knew what was coming. Well, if I know you're running smash right now, then I can make a call defensively to be prepared for it, and you're not going to complete it on me if I have any kind of good players on my team. It's the knowing when. And it's not that he ran the same play 15 times, but if 13 of those times he had the defense in a look where it was favorable to run that play, then great, keep running that play until they do something to stop it. It's just, I think there's some things to be added to keep teams from being able to figure those things out, but then also, more importantly, accent the specific skill sets of his players. So that's what I just want to see. Just a little bit more layers, a little bit more on the run, a little bit more vertical stretch to go with all the great things that you do in these other areas. I think would benefit the offense quite a bit.
Brian, we have a daily mailbag to take us the rest of the way here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. This does happen to be your first mailbag. You can always feel free to put in a question. The way you do that is you put MB for mailbag or a mailbox emoji. Lets us know to set your question aside. You can always put in a super chat that bumps your question up to the top. We prefer questions based on today's show. We talked about the offensive position battles, the changes we want to see on offense. So feel free to get those in. Like I said, super chats always get bumped up to the top.
We did have some super chats, and we'll start off here from Charlie Weiss's last belt loop.
Appreciate the super chat. Instead of Jim Rome is burning, BD is burning. All jokes aside, this is a good show, and I forgot the gym story of guys having to use the YMCA. Where was the gym, or was there not one after hours? Thanks.
So my understanding is that the strength coach was dealing with some health problems at the time. And so he just wasn't around. And when you can't have guys in a school weight room if there's nobody around. There's just liability. And so what would happen is the weight room was just open way less. And so several players had to go get local memberships and the other thing too is they didn't feel they were being pushed at all in the strength program. There were guys who were like, dude, I worked harder in my high school strength program than we are right now. And so that was a bit of what was behind that. And that's why Kelly was forced to make a change after 2016 with the strength coach as well. And I was saying this at the time. This is one of the things I was railing against. Like, this team is not prepared physically to do what they need to do. Because I think there was a time when Paul Longo, I forget which one was the strength guy.
I think it was Paul Longo.
He had a great reputation for a while, but he was legitimately dealing with some health issues. So I'm not even necessarily blaming him. It's like, look, when he was dealing with that stuff, you should have brought in more help for him and didn't. And then he was forced to get rid of him. And that's when he was going to go hire a guy from USC and Stanford. And instead, Bob Diaco calls him up and says, hey, we just got fired. You need to bring in this Matt Bayless guy. And Kelly was like, okay, cool. I'll bring you in with the guy from USC. The guy from USC was like, I'm not doing that. And he brought in Matt Bayless. And the whole thing is, well, good on him to listen to Bob Diaco, but why didn't he go after Matt Bayless before? Like that's the thing that like, how did he not know who Matt Bayless was before that? And so there's a lot of those things, Trev, that you look at and say that's what was so frustrating. But I never said YMCA. I just said gym. That was, I'm saying maybe some of them were going to the YMCA, but I didn't say YMCA. Because some say, I worked at the Y. I never saw Notre Dame football. I never said the Y. So I don't know where they were working out, but that's what I was told.
Gotcha. Question in from Armor Dude USMA 87. Do we know when fall camp will start?
All we're allowed to say is when it's going to start. And we did get an email today saying when it's going to start. And I believe, Trev, it was August 4th, I believe, is what the email said. So August 4th is when they're going to start fall camp. We have another super chat here from Jari Z-Bear.
Appreciate the super chat. I was playing college football 27, and they had Micah Gilbert starting at boundary, and they had Quincy Porter returning punts. I think it's settled, Jake.
Yeah, this was a response to a comment. We said, well, we didn't think certain things were settled. So I always love it. I looked at I haven't played it yet. I don't think I'm going to buy it this year. But I was looking at some of the things, and you're like, wow, that guy's the fastest guy on the team, huh? That's an interesting take. There was a lot of that. Oh, CJ Carr's faster than that guy on this game? Oh, that's interesting. There's a lot of that stuff. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I'm going to buy it this year. I don't have the time to play it.
I get it completely.
Another one from Jari.
Appreciate you. I was also watching Landon Tengwell break down the NDO line, and he was hyping up Styles Prescott.
Okay.
From Iden, how often does and will CJ Carr go against Notre Dame's #1 defense? If he can carve that D, I can't imagine anything stopping him but himself.
A lot in fall camp. Look, during the season, they'll do one-on-ones against each other. So like it may be Leonard Moore going against, the starting wide, boundary guys. It may be, Jordan Faison's going to get some work against DJ McKinney in the season, but that's usually like in the one-on-one periods. Occasionally they'll do that in 7-on-7 as well, because the other team is running concepts that are similar to what we do. And there may be some times during the year where you'll see like the offense and defense go against each other good on good in like a drill, because they're playing somebody maybe that's not good or somebody that's similar to what they do. But more often than not, they get the majority of the reps in season against the scout team. But in fall camp, especially the first, up until the last really 2 weeks of fall camp, as you get into game prep. So they go against each other good on good a lot. You'll see ones versus twos and twos versus ones, but there's also a lot of work against the ones. And so they get a lot.
No doubt.
Just not as much once the season starts. Just smart. You don't want to be banging on each other Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of every game week against your best unit, especially when your units are as good as they are now.
And CJ will get a little bit more reps this fall camp than he did last fall camp, because there's not going to be a quarterback battle during the first 2 weeks of this camp. So
it's a good point. Very good point. Yep.
Another one from Iden. Changes we want to see on offense. Throw the rock around, baby. I've waited my whole adult life for Notre Dame to have a gunslinger, minus Quinn. Air that thing out, Den Brock. I know BD agrees.
No, I'm not an air it out guy. I'm a guy that wants balance. I want to be good running the ball and throwing the ball. I also think that we're forgetting about a guy that aired it out as well as anybody that's put in their name uniform on, that played quarterback after Brady Quinn back in 2009. And just want to, they aired it out back then as well. But I like balance. And if I only got to throw the ball 20 times to rip you up and score 50 points and win the game, then I'm only going to throw the ball 20 times. I like balance, which means I can beat you throwing it. I can beat you running it. I can beat you however I need to beat you. And that's what I'm a believer in. Now, I think that requires you to have an efficient and explosive pass offense as well as an efficient and explosive run offense. But listen, if CJ Carr averages 20 yards, 20 passes a game, and Notre Dame wins a title, I'm fine with that. I mean, Trev, there was a game, I'm trying to remember how many specific yards we got. We got a lot, but we had a game one year when I was at Duquesne where we threw for like 350 yards, and we threw the ball, I think, 20 times. I mean, it was like, yeah, we just kind of rolled that team. So it doesn't always have to be airing it out a bunch. You can air it out and be aggressive. I mean, I'm good with that, but you know, I like efficiency and explosiveness. That's what I like. I'm not someone who's necessarily a fan of like volume. I'm a fan of explosiveness and efficiency. Sometimes that does mean volume. Sometimes it will.
For sure.
So yeah. Good stuff. All right, let's get to some more questions here. We got one from Daily Comments, one of our resident Miami fans.
Hey, question about the magazine that may be answered already. Is the magazine just for Notre Dame, or is it college football in general also?
Thanks, so this year it's just going to be about Notre Dame exclusive, like primarily. We will have an opponent section with, I think, 4 or 5 articles about opponents. We'll also have a college football section where we kind of do our playoff predictions. We'll do our own preseason top 25. Trev's going to have an article where we kind of talk about the fact that we think this is going to be a bit of a bounce back year for college football, where we think there's going to be more elite teams this year, or the quality of teams this year we think could be better. Where it's been some down years since Georgia won their title. We've talked about this. I don't think Michigan, Ohio State, and Indiana are in the same league as like 21, 22 Georgia, 19 LSU, 18 Clemson, 12 Alabama, 08 Florida. I still don't think they're in the same league as those teams. This year, I think we could see that. And not just Notre Dame. I think there's like 5 or 6 teams that could potentially be that. And so we'll have an article about that. But it'll primarily be Notre Dame. Yeah, good question.
From Chris Ayers, is Quincy Porter going to be anywhere close to the hype and projection that a lot of services are calling for him to have?
I don't know if he will. I think he certainly has the potential. You say, well, man, a guy caught 4 passes last year. Cool. That's 3 more than Equanimity St. Brown had in 2015. And the next year he went out and caught, was it like 59 for like 962 or 972, 9 touchdowns in only 12 games, something like that.
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of close to those numbers. Miles Boykin had something like 13 career catches before his breakout year in 2018. Will Fuller caught 6 passes as a freshman. Golden Tate caught 6 passes as a freshman. The next year's true sophomores, they both went over 1,000 yards. So I'm fine putting hype on a young receiver and saying he can do it, because we've seen it happen a lot. It's just not a position where experience matters as much. Will he? I don't know. Can he? Sure. He can have that kind of breakout year. So can, in my opinion, Cam Williams. I just don't know if they will. And that goes back to the conversation we had in the second part of today's show, Trev, which is, I mean, look, we don't know what's going to happen to Boundary because they're very unproven. Who's going to step up? But we had a similar conversation going into 2014 because remember, they lost TJ Jones from the previous year. And then DeVaris Daniels got kicked off the team before the season. And so you're like, dude, I have no clue what they're going to do at receiver. And then guess what happens? Will Fuller breaks out. Corey Robinson has a big year. And I think Corey caught like 9 passes as a freshman for like 150-something yards and then goes out and has a 40-plus catch, 500-yard sophomore season. So he's capable of that. Will he do it? Don't know. But it's not one of those ones where I'm like, guys, we need to pump the brakes on this kid. He's like, this is not the year for that. I don't know if it will or won't. But receiver's different, like Bryce Young at D end, or, thinking Will Black is going to be year 3 version of Joe Alt in his first year as a starter. Like, that's not going to happen. Could Quincy Porter be Equanimity St. Brown from his sophomore year? Sure. Could Cam Williams? Sure. Could Micah Gilbert? Different. He might be more of a Miles Boykin type, contested catch back shoulder, but it's possible. Because past results do not dictate future success at receiver the way that it does at other positions.
Yeah. Yep. And Notre Dame is also not in the position where they absolutely need it to be Quincy Porter. It could be one of, like we talked about before. As long as one of Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert, or Quincy Porter breaks out, they're going to be just fine. Whereas some of the other guys needing to break out that have that hype and projection, like a Bryce Young, you argue that he needs to break out this year, and it's things like that. I'm with you.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not even like one guy breaks out as like the guy. Maybe it's the trio of them all have. Like, what if nobody catches more than 30 balls in the boundary? But what if Quincy has 25 and Micah has 20 and Cam has 15 and they all average at least 14 yards a catch? Like, well, there wasn't like a guy, but they clearly all three play, they all three produce. And if you put their numbers together, what did I say? Like 30 for Quincy, 20 for Micah, and 15 for Cam. That's 55 catches if I'm doing the math correctly. No, actually 65 catches. And you're probably over 900 yards at that point in time. I don't care if it was one guy that did all that, is if they do it as a group. So sometimes it can be like none of them broke out, but they all did. I'm fine. It doesn't have to be one guy. I just want to see the production from the position.
Yep. From Micah's Mind at 22, how much of an emphasis do you think the coaches put on the chemistry between any of these guys and CJ? Seemed like he had a couple of guys he was really clicking with in spring ball.
They put a lot of emphasis on that, and that's a very important thing. Who is a quarterback comfortable throwing to? Because I can say all I want. CJ, you got to be comfortable with this guy. I need you to do it right now, but that doesn't mean that he's going to. You know what I mean? Like I can want it all I want, but sometimes guys just don't connect. Or quarterback remembers like he just can't get over this or that or this other thing, or or maybe he just hey, I love throwing to this guy, but man, me and this guy over here have a great connection. I just trust that guy. That's okay. And if you're smart and you're a coach, you're going to play into that a little bit. Now, you also as a coach need to be smart about, okay, let me go out and practice today and have a game plan where everything we're doing for the scout team or everything we're going to do on 7-on-7 is geared towards getting this guy as the primary look and trying to force that potential connection and see if we can create a bond there. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But you need to kind of do both. You need to take what the quarterback is already comfortable with, but then also try to create scenarios where you can get him comfortable with somebody else. So like CJ Carr is like, hey, I'm very comfortable throwing to Micah Gilbert, Jordan Faison, but I'm not comfortable throwing to Milan Graham and Quincy Porter. You just say, well, sorry, Quincy and Milan, you guys are going to play this year. Or do you then use practice time and extra time to then encourage them to try to get a better connection? Well, you do it because where did it come from with CJ and Faison or CJ and whoever else is already there? It came through time, working together, practicing together, working on the scout team together, things like that. And so you can force the issue a little bit. But once you get to game planning, it's like, okay, we force the issue as much as we can, and here's just where we are, and that's what we're going to do. So if he's more comfortable throwing to this guy, but we want this route combination called, then maybe you move his guy to the primary read on that particular play. That's why there's a value to moving guys around, because that can help a quarterback. Like, hey, we love this concept, but he's super comfortable on third down throwing to that guy. So then maybe we move that guy around. So he's now in the position where we think the ball is going to go on this third down play. So, those things are all part of it. That's part of knowing your quarterback and really building his connection with players and then building his comfort level of executing your offense at a high level.
Yeah, it's this reason, Micah, why Milan Graham has inserted himself. One of the reasons why Milan Graham has inserted himself in the conversation to potentially start at slot. He had a really good performance in the spring. Some of that is because of the chemistry that him and CJ displayed in the spring, too. Super chat from Daily Comments. Appreciate you. Both Miami and Notre Dame have, quote, trap games before they play each other. Miami at North Carolina and Notre Dame playing the triple option against Navy. Is that not being talked about enough?
Well, I don't know if Miami people are talking about North Carolina a lot, but we've definitely mentioned the Navy thing. I think, Trev, you brought that up last week in a discussion about when we were asked about what we would do to change the schedule. I think you talked about the fact that I'd move Navy away from the week before Miami. So, but no, I think that's a very fair point. Very fair point. I don't know if Miami look. I don't follow Miami shows or chats. I know that on social media, Miami fans tend to tell me that you're going to beat everybody by 100, and so I don't know why you'd be too worried about that game.
Yeah.
Because you're going to beat them by 70 because this is the greatest team ever assembled. I'm totally kidding, Daily, kind of, but yeah, some of your fans, and I know Notre Dame's got those too, but some of the Miami fans just like, man, you don't know how to come at me right now, do you? You don't know how to have a grown-up conversation right now, do you? I didn't think so. But that's what I like about Daly and Spencer. We can disagree, but at least they come at us like grown-ups.
Yeah, the fascinating thing about the Navy game is all of the signs point to it being a trap game. Like, it's a different style of opponent. It's the week before an absolutely massive game. But then on the flip side of that discussion, it's hard for me to consider something a trap game when you start preparing for that style of play in like fall camp. So like that's what's fascinating about it. It's like it's a trap game, but it's not, but it is. Like it's going to be a very interesting topic of discussion the week of. So we'll see.
I also don't think Miami players have a lot of respect for Notre Dame based on comments they made last year. So I don't know that they'll be too amped up about the Notre Dame game. They might be a little bit more focused on the North Carolina game.
From Chris Ayers, if Aeneas Williams is getting 60 catches in 2026, is that a good or bad thing?
Anytime a question like this is asked, it can be either. It really depends on the context of the situation. Is he catching 60 balls because your quarterback's unwilling to throw the ball down the field, and so he's just checking down all the time? Like, yeah, Aeneas had 9 catches, but 4 of those, you had a dig coming open behind it. He just wouldn't pull the trigger. That's not good. If he's catching 60 balls because teams are dropping 8 a lot and he's, you've got this route, he's getting 4 or 5 checkdowns on first down. He catches 4 or 5 balls a game on checkdowns on first down, or he's, teams are dropping and he's just checking it off. And next thing you know, it's 2nd and 2 or 3rd and 1 because he's, and there's a couple well-designed screens in the game. And sure, 5 catches a game gets you to 60 in the regular season. It just depends on why. That's a check down's a beautiful thing when it's the right call.
Yeah.
A check down's a terrible thing when it's like, dude, you had the over. Why did you panic and go to the check down?
Yeah.
Like take the throw was there, but like, hey, you got pressured. You couldn't let that overcome. They blitzed this guy. You threw the check down to the tight end on the stick route behind it. Great job, buddy. Well done. It just depends on the scenario. Brady Quinn threw a ton of balls to Darius Walker. And it wasn't like, man, Brady's unwilling to throw the ball down the field. It wasn't that. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
It was a natural part of the offense. It just depends. But I would probably lean towards that would be probably a pretty good thing. It'll tell me they're also doing a lot of perimeter throws to replace perimeter runs. And we talked earlier about how I want to see some more perimeter run stuff. But if they're doing things at the back to get the ball quickly to the perimeter and it's considered a throw, okay. Maybe they're like, hey, listen, we could run outside zone like a toss crack, but we just feel like with the way defenses today play with guys overhang that you run that buck sweep, it just doesn't have the effect it did back in the day where, okay, cool. Then run a swing screen that kind of does the same thing, but it'll let you get outside quicker, puts more of a stress on the defense, and you can set some things up. Okay, cool. That's fine. And then you can have some kind of, that's a way to get the ball to the perimeter. Maybe you run a little quick slide where you just sprint out and you're isolating that flat defender. If he bails, you just get it to the back in space and let him. Those are good too. It's more about getting to the perimeter. I'd like to see some runs that do that, but there may be some throws because a lot of teams now, Trev, you have to understand is sometimes teams say, hey, look, we're not going to do as much of the outside running that they used to do 20, 30 years ago because teams aren't as condensed where they had a Sam, Mike, and a Will inside the box like they did before. So it's a little harder to run a lot of that, and that's a very fair point. That's why I'm not saying run it 15 times a game. I'm saying there's going to be games where you don't need it because, like, dude, they have not stopped inside zone duo all day. Like Clemson 2022, I know they had more in the playbook run game-wise in 2022 that they didn't use that game. But it's just like what they were doing was working so well. There's no need to go to all the other stuff because he was so in his bag as far as how to call and run duo that they didn't need to run a bunch of other stuff. There's going to be games like that too. But then there's games where it's like, look, we need to do this, or we're going to do this because we want the next week's team worried about this. Sometimes that's what you do too. You may run this 8 times against Navy because you want Miami to spend a half a day of practice working on that play. That's some of the gamesmanship coaches do. Like, why are we doing this? Because we want them to be worried about it. So that's why we did it in the 2 weeks leading up to the Miami game. You know what I mean? That's why we did it against Stanford and Navy, because we want Miami thinking, we're not going to use that against Miami, but we want them worried about it. Some of that too.
Without a doubt. Yeah, I'm with you. From T. Albany, how does Denbrock get these receivers on the field and opportunities to do things that they do really well without giving away tendencies?
Well, that can be a challenge, but that's the thing, is you have to have guys that know more than a couple things. But sometimes, like, I don't care if they know this is coming, because look, Cam Williams can only run a hitch, a quick out, a comeback, and a post route or a go route, and that's all he can do. That's fine. Teams know he's going to run those routes. What they don't know is what we're going to complement those routes with. So you may say, hey, look, when this guy's in the game, he's only running these 4 routes. That's fine. You can have a plan for that, but you don't know what we're complementing with that route. That's part of it, but you also don't usually have this variance where this guy can only run these 3 routes and that guy can only run those 3 routes and that guy can only run those 3 routes, where you're really giving away any tendencies. The tendencies that you tend to give away in those situations are when that guy's in the game and he motions like that, they are going to 9 out of 10 times they run tunnel, or they run mesh, or you know what I mean? Like those, or when this guy's in the game, they don't throw the ball. Like last year when Malachi Fields was not on the field, very heavy running tendency. Like things like that are more of what you see. Like, hey, or when this guy's on the field, they're throwing. Maybe it's not to him, but they're throwing. And those are the tendencies you kind of want to avoid. That's why I say when you get receivers on the field, you need to be able to run your offense, not, well, we're going to put this guy in this drive because we're going to run the ball a lot more, and we're going to give this guy a breather. We're going to give Faison a breather because we're going to probably run on the first 3 or 4 plays of this drive. Well, that's when you start giving away tendencies. It's not so much like this is the only 4 routes that guy. Well, I got 13 different pass concepts I can run with those 4 routes to the boundary. And that's why it's that part of it's not as big of a tendency driver. It's more of the run versus pass, or when they run, if you're running a specific play to a guy, that's when you can kind of get into some of those, more of those issues.
Yeah, agreed. I'm not too concerned about the player-specific tendencies, because the one thing that I love about college football is there's still the piece of you have to be able to stop it. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the NFL, it's you have to really get creative with some of those things, because you're going up against some of the other best football players actively in the world at that moment. Mm-hmm. Whereas in college, it's not like every corner you face is arguably the best cornerback in college football. So like there is still the degree of like, yeah, you might know Cam Williams is going to run a go. You got a corner that can run stride for stride with him. I don't think that you do. It's in 2015, it wasn't a mystery that Derrick Henry was going to get the football 20 to 25 times a game. What you don't want to give away is the tendencies of when you're going to call them and things like that, but you also have to be able to stop it.
Penn State game, 2024. That 3rd and 9, they knew slot fade was coming.
Yeah.
Just couldn't stop it. The guy had Jaden Greathouse covered as well as you can cover a guy on a slot fade. Riley threw a great ball, and Jaden just said, it's mine. So sometimes it's like, look, I don't know. I don't care that you know it's coming. The question is, can you stop it?
Yep.
That's a bigger question.
Another one from Chris Ayers. How far is Burris from getting significant snaps? Is Cam Williams closer to being a factor?
I mean, they're both great fall camps away from getting on the field. They're both very talented players. They have work to do and people to pass up, but they're both going to get a chance. Notre Dame's very high on Elijah Burris. It's just he's not looking to beat out Jordan Faison as much as it's like position yourself to be the guy once Jordan Faison leaves, and then be comfortable enough to get some reps and maybe get some of those KK Smith reps from last year type of thing. He's got a shot with a good fall camp to do that.
Yep.
Same with Cam Williams. Just now you got to go out there and prove it.
From Jay Melvin, Brian, after what BK said, I'd like to say this. I grew up as a Notre Dame fan during the Kelly era, and I truly believe Notre Dame was the problem for a long time, and I'd like to thank you for telling the truth.
My pleasure. It's what I always do. I'm going to tell you the truth or give you my honest opinion. Sometimes it's an opinion is not always truth. An opinion is just an evaluation of situation. There is not necessarily truth. I think there is truth in this world. I'm not one of those postmoderns that are like, oh, there is no truth. It's your truth, my truth. No, I don't think that's true. You can say that, but I don't have to go with your delusion. But when I say I think John Elway is the greatest quarterback of all time, that's my honest opinion. That doesn't mean it's true, because someone else can have an opinion that's different and make their case for it. That's more subjective. But I'm always going to tell you what I think. And if I can't, then I'll say, hey, man, I can't really give you that. I'd like to tell you that, but I can't share that with you. But like when I tell you I think Notre Dame can win a championship, I'm not saying that to get clicks or to get you to listen or to get you engaged. I believe that. When I predict Notre Dame to win every game, I will predict them to win every game again this year. I can't tell you the last time I predicted Notre Dame to lose a game. I genuinely believe that if they do the things we talk about, they will win the game. If I think Notre Dame's going to get beat by 30, I'm not going to be like, I think they're going to win by 17. It's going to be tough, but and a lot of times the prediction is if they do this. Well, I don't know if they're going to win or not. Like I say all the time, if I knew that they were going to win or not win, I'd be a very wealthy man. But you're always going to get my honest opinion. Or if I do say something that I know to be true, I'm going to say it. I'm not going to run cover for a coach just so I can get more access to his program. I don't need that. That's the nice thing about Irish Breakdown is with what we do and what we specialize in, I don't need sources to tell me this, that, or that. It's nice to have that. It's nice to provide that information for customers, but I'm going to be fine and I was fine. I mean, my business took off during a time when Brian Kelly was actively working to sabotage my business. And that's a fact. That's not even because I was told that by people that he was doing that too. So we don't need that. And I also decided if being successful means I have to lie or kiss butt or cover for people, then I just don't want to be successful. I'm okay with that. I am. So I'm always going to give you my honest opinion. You don't have to like it. And a lot of times people don't, but you're going to get my honest opinion.
If you did know how the future was going to pan out for Notre Dame football, we would be very wealthy people.
Yeah,
that is for sure. We would be cashing in on FanDuel. There's no doubt about that.
I would please still be our sponsor. And by the way, here's my thing. Yeah.
Right.
I'd be Brendan Soares being it up, man. Too soon?
You would do it with more honesty and integrity though. You wouldn't make fake accounts. Don't worry.
No, I wouldn't be using my wife's account you were correct on that.
From J. Melvin, Brian, fun question here. Do you think Brian Kelly would, as head coach with the current staff, would he treat and talk to some of them the way he did his other coaches, maybe someone like Charlie Partridge?
He'd try, but no, he wouldn't. Like, I was told a story one time about how Brian Kelly tried to come into an offensive line meeting, and here he wasn't having it. And Brian Kelly never made that mistake again. So, no, he wouldn't. He would bully he'd bully Jeff Quinn. He'd bully Brian Polian. He would bully, some guy that he could. He wouldn't talk to because he'd know, that or he'd be okay doing it because he knew he'd leave him. But he knew who he could and couldn't talk to like that. So, yeah. Some of them he would, some of them he would not.
From ND Milton fan, if Sullivan Absher gets beat out, could he still be drafted?
Sure, because he would look, could he stay? If he stay, let's say he stays in Notre Dame for 5 years and just never starts. Is there a world where he could still get drafted? Yeah. He's going to play some backup snaps. Maybe he plays a couple games for an injured guy. You'd have the film from this past season, the height, weight, the combine. Well, I probably wouldn't be at the combine. Pro day numbers and pro day workouts. You may have an offensive line coach that falls in love with them and says, "Hey, coach, man, we get in this round 7 and that kid's still there. Please, for me, take him." You could have that. Most likely, if he gets beat out, you'd see him get his degree from Notre Dame and then play his last year or two somewhere else, and then get drafted, which certainly could happen.
Definitely a potential there. It would be tough, but with something like the NFL draft, you can just never say that it won't happen. So,
especially if you go somewhere else and starts and plays well. It's not given. I don't think Pat Coogan or Rocco Spindler got drafted, but actually, did Pat Coogan get drafted?
I'm not sure.
Let me look that up here real quick.
I think he
I
did.
can't remember if he did or not, but I mean, he, let's see here, Coogan. Yeah, he got drafted in the 6th round. So he got beat out, transferred somewhere else and played well and got drafted.
It just all depends on which team likes you and which one does. I mean, because on the flip side, it's like Emil Wagner started for Notre Dame for 2 straight years and didn't get drafted. He was a captain in his final year. So it's just, you never know. If that one team falls in love with you, you'll get drafted.
Brian Hockney asks if Coach Freeman has a press conference this month. Not in July. He'll have media. He does something with the media in July, but it's not a formal press conference. They'll usually do something like either first day or like a day before fall camp. Something like that is usually what they do. But won't be a press conference this month.
Tommy Guns, is Young Washington your new favorite patriotic movie, Brian? Angel Studios had already announced a sequel.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not my new favorite patriotic movie. I don't know that anything is going to top The Patriot as far as just like patriotic, but it was really well done. The stuff where they took like liberties with certain things, it was not stuff that changed the story. So, like for example, I won't say who if you haven't seen it, but there's a guy that gets killed during a battle where he doesn't actually get killed in that battle, but it doesn't change the point of what they're trying to get across. You know what I mean? Like there's some things that are not necessarily historically exactly how it went down. There's a scene where he's talking to some Native Americans that I don't think happen in real life that way, but there's stories and there's like, there's letters and there's stuff that came out from that time where they believed that about him, even if that particular scene didn't happen. And it's a way to kind of get across this overarching theme. It's kind of like, did you ever watch Chernobyl on HBO, Trev? Very, very well done. And so like there's this lady in Chernobyl and she did not exist in real life, but she was a compilation of like several people that were involved in it that they put into one character. Because you can't have 8 different people that are part of the storyline. You need to kind of condense it, but it doesn't change what happened. And in that regard, I thought it was very well done. And they picked a really good actor for it. I mean, as far as like he's like 6'4" in real life, so like he towers over everybody. And George Washington at the time was just always like the tallest guy in the room. No, I thought it was really well done. Really well done. I was shocked they had Andy Serkis was General Edward Braddock, and I was like, that guy played like a serious character like that, because he plays like kind of those weird, funny characters and stuff. He did really. I mean, it was really well done. I was surprised I thought it was going to be cheesy. It's kind of like Christian movies, like that for a long time. Like you watch like a movie on like Pure Flix, or it's like a Christian movie, and it's like it's great meaning, and I love it, but it's like just not the greatest quality. It's a little cheesy. Like there's a movie called Courageous that I love. It's a great movie as far as the meaning behind it, but it's like it's not like the most. It's not winning Oscars. You know what I'm saying? This was actually pretty good, especially for the budget. And I'm very excited that they're coming. I think that the sequel is going to be called 1776. So it's going to be more about Washington during the Revolutionary War, which I cannot wait to see. But it was really well done. But I wouldn't say it's my favorite. I'd say it's definitely a movie that I like and that I'd watch again. And it certainly makes me want to go read some of my books I have up in my bookshelf about George Washington in that period again. So yeah, it was very good. If you haven't seen it, go see Young Washington. Vince and I went and saw it Sunday night. It's really, really good. And I mean, I heard it was going to be good. I didn't go into it with like super high expectations, but I was expecting to like it, and I really liked it. I really enjoyed it.
Good deal. From Jay Melvin, Brian, do you know if Jaden Greathouse is finally fully healthy and recovered from last year's injury?
I believe so, but we haven't gotten official word on that from Notre Dame.
From Micah's Mind, how much do you think CJ's preferences in chemistry will affect the receiver battles?
It can be, well, number one, it can impact it in that like certain guys just don't get opportunities because CJ just doesn't throw them to him as much, that's life. That's not just CJ Carr. That's every position battle. Where it can have a big effect too is like, let's say it comes down to 2 guys are really close and we're just not sure who's going to be the guy. That's when a quarterback's comfort level may come into play. Sometimes though, as a coach, you got to be like, look, I know why he likes that guy more because they're boys and he's just more used to it, but I need him to get more comfortable with this guy over here because that guy's he's going to be the dude. But there may come a time where like, dude, these are both really good players and we're just not sure. But man, CJ just has a connection with that kid. And that may decide who's going to get 65% of the reps and who's going to get 35. So yeah, there's times it could certainly. And sometimes a quarterback having confidence in you as a receiver can give you more confidence in yourself. Hey man, I got to go out there and run this route because I know CJ is going to bring it to me. And he believes in me. I got to go make this play for him. So it can affect it in that regard as well.
From Spencer, another resident Miami fan in the chat. If Leonard Moore shifts from the boundary to shadow Malachi Tony like he did against Mekhi Lemon, who would you shift to the boundary to cover Joshua Moore, Gray, McKinney? Do you know their performances against larger receivers?
I would just, I don't know who they're going to do that to. I would assume it would be DJ McKinney, because if you go back and watch DJ McKinney at Colorado, they did kind of a lot of games left and right. They'd stay left, right. So they would there'd be snaps he's in the boundary and snaps that he's to the field. So I think he's kind of more positioned for. Now, I think Christian Gray can play that position. There's no question about it. But I think Christian's been at the field so much though in his career that I think it would just make more sense to have your 6'2" guy that's actually lined up in the boundary and been effective and done all those type of things. I think it would just make a little bit more sense to kind of have him handle that role. Just think it would make more sense that way. So,
sure.
Yeah, that's what I think you'll see him do. Look, they've got some big receivers in the Big 12 that he's kind of gone up against, and so I think he'd be fine in that regard. He'd be okay. Let's see here. Let's get to the next one.
From Jay Melvin, Brian, are you surprised how fast this offseason has gone by? It felt like last offseason went on forever. This year, it felt like a month ago IB was going live to announce Notre Dame's new portal pickups.
I actually think the opposite. I think it's like it's recently gone by fast, but I just felt like the offseason went on forever because the start was so slow. Because Notre Dame's offseason started in November.
Yeah. Over the last 3 weeks, it started to really pick up. Really started to fly by. It doesn't feel like the 4th of July was 10 days ago. I mean, it's really starting to move.
The end always goes quicker. The in between was, yeah.
From daily comments, have you heard any about coaches identify tendencies with AI? I'd imagine it helps with self-scouting. Curious how technology is used by coaches on things like that.
Not enough to really go in depth on it. You hear about those things. You hear about coaches are using AI for those type of things or using it to help them with their own tendencies and stuff like that. I just think it depends on what type of it. That's like the AI is being used like really broadly now. And there's certain things, but like that's kind of always kind of been there. I think what AI does is it just gets you that data a little faster. And you've always had programs that like you type in the data, you've got to insert the data. Like you don't just like say, hey, AI, what's Miami going to do? There's got to be some data it's got to pull from, right? What's the data that's being used? And the correctness of that data is then going to influence the correctness of what the AI can spit out to you. So, but yeah, I mean, anything that can make things go quicker and more efficient can help you. I would say that any coach that's relying on AI on what to call is probably not going to be successful because there's still a level of feel to this. Like, yeah, we always do this, but it's like, it's a perfect example, Trev, is did you watch the Elway documentary on Netflix by chance? You should watch. It was really good. But they talked about it. The play where he hurdles, he dives in the Super Bowl against the Packers. They talked about how they ran this play. And Elway hated it. He didn't want to run it. He didn't like it. And Mike Shanahan was like, John, they're going to line up in this coverage no matter what, every time, 100% of the time. And he's like, well, what if they don't? John, they're going to line up in it. It's just what they're going to do. We broke it down every single time in that situation, in that look. Like they give this look and they run that coverage every time. Well, then they get to the Super Bowl and the Packers don't do that. Why? Because the Packers study themselves as well. And they go into those games and they know their own tendencies. Good coaches know their own tendencies. And so then they'll mix them up. Well, AI can't tell you when they're going to do that. And so it's a great tool. You just got to be careful with, it's like we were in the social media a couple weeks ago. Some guy, no, it was a week ago. It was something about, oh man, I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, it was about the, it was about the dining room. And the guy was like, it's only for football players. And I said, no, it's not. And he said, yeah, I asked Grok. Was it Grok, whatever it is, the thing on X? And they said it's for football players. I was like, yeah, because it's working with limited information. But it's not. It hasn't been reported that it's going to be for anybody else as far as like that it could find or what the post had said. So you got to be real careful with that stuff. It's good tools, but like Trev, you put in our transcripts and stuff, and we use AI to kind of kick that out. But then you got to go through and listen to it and make sure that, it'll say where you can't just take it and then, you know what I mean? Like you use it to transcribe, but then you've got to clean it up and make it good. It's a tool to give us something more efficiently and more expediently, but then you've got to use it appropriately to fit into your story and to make sure that this word was correct, this spelling was correct, or, so there's a lot of things like that. It's, I think people are just kind of leaning into it as this wonderful thing that is flawless and whatever, and it is not. So you got to be real careful with it.
Yep. From Chris Ayers, what do you think is Notre Dame's strongest individual position room as it relates to the individual rooms and the rest of college football? I think it's linebacker. I mean, if you're asking like what is the best position group on Notre Dame's team compared to the rest of the country, there's no other linebacker room in the P5 really in Division I in all 138 teams that returns both of their starters and all three rotational guys from last year.
I think you could also make an argument for secondary. What's interesting is I don't necessarily disagree with you, Trev, but if you look at the national conversation, the secondary gets more of that assumption. So everybody thinks the secondary is the best. There's some people that don't even have linebacker room in the top 5. CBS Sports did their build your perfect team, and they had Notre Dame secondary, and then they had Notre Dame's corners, and then they had Tennessee's linebackers.
Yeah.
I'm like, do you guys watch football like at all? I was like, okay, maybe they only wanted to use one team per thing, I guess. I don't know, but it was pretty terrible.
From Catfish Kelly's Dirty Plunger, do you feel Jags coming back or Porter being a dude is more important for a title run this season?
I'd say probably Porter being a dude. I think they can have the best offensive line in the country without Charles Jagasaw. He makes it easier. He makes the margin for error smaller and makes you even more dominant, but you can still win a Joe Moore Award if he doesn't play this year. The margin for error might be a little bit smaller if Quincy Porter's not a dude.
Yeah. Agreed. Another one from Chris Ayers. Is Joey O'Brien talented enough to where you have to find a way to get him on the field, and that is appreciating the level of play that Long and Talich have?
Yes, he is that talented, but being that talented doesn't always mean that you're playing at a way that forces me to get you on the field. If you're super talented, but you keep messing up your assignments, then I'm not going to play.
Yeah.
If this kid has got tremendous talent, great range, makes a ton of interceptions on balls, but every third play he's going to completely do the wrong thing and give up a 50-yard touchdown, then guess what? I'm not playing you. So it's not just talent. It's you have to have some level of grasp of the system. Now, where I think some coaches make a mistake is he doesn't have the same grasp that a junior has, so you play the junior. Is his impact going to be greater than this other kid who does everything right? This kid does everything right 90% of the time. This guy does it 95% of the time, but the guy that does it 87 to 90 is way more talented. You have to weigh, okay, can I live with that difference in assignment correctness? Is it going to be more beneficial to get the big plays and knowing we might give up a play or two? What's that margin where it becomes cost beneficial? And that's the decision you have to weigh. From what we saw from Joey O'Brien this year, I think the answer is going to be yes. I think he's a very smart football player. I think that's going to help him get on the field right away.
Yep.
So when I make that statement, I'm making that generally speaking. It doesn't necessarily mean that Joey's that way. It's just that It's not just about talent. It has to be talent. There has to be some level of I know what I'm doing. And here is the final question here, Trev.
From Jay Melvin, Brian, do you think McKinney can be as good as Cam Hart in 2023?
I think he can be, sure. Will he be? That I don't know. But can he be? Yes. Now, here's the thing. He's very different than Cam. When you look at it and say, okay, Cam was more of a hitter. Cam was a downhill guy. Cam was used his length and physicality to make plays. He'd come down and smack you. DJ's more of a cover guy. He can tackle, but he's not going to lead the nation and force fumbles, most likely, like Cam did in 2023. So it's a different type of good, but if you're asking, can he be as dominant at his position this year as Cam was in 23? Yes, he can. I'm not predicting that he will do it because he's got to, with Cam, we saw flashes of it for 2 years. And it was about, can you put it all together in a Notre Dame uniform? With DJ, we saw some flashes. We saw that in 24 that he's got the potential to be that kind of guy if he can raise his game, but he didn't raise his game the next year because he was injured. So he's got to still show it, but the physical tools, the experience, the playmaking potential is there. I mean, he had 11 passes defense 2 years ago at Colorado, two interceptions and 9 breakups. That's more than Cam ever did. Yeah. So like I said, they're different, but he has the potential to be an impact player on the same level that Cam was an impact player. He's just got to show it to me because Cam was a dude in 2023. An absolute dude in 2023.
Yep. One of the biggest differences, Cam Hart has about 20 pounds on DJ McKinney. I mean, it doesn't feel like it because, people remember Cam Hart as being like the tall 6'2", 6'3", like longer
strong.
corner. He was built. I mean, people forget he came to Notre Dame to be like a wide receiver in the boundary, at 6'2", 6'3", well over 200 pounds. DJ McKinney, I think, just got up to like 185, 190. So
right.
There's a definite difference there, but I'm with you. I think their impact could definitely be the same.
Yeah. Very, very different. That's why I say very different games, similar impact. Yes. With what they do well, similar impact. Andre Tonsel, you had a question about second team defensive lineup. That's more of a mailbag question. That's just a little bit longer. I didn't want you to think I'm ignoring you, buddy, but that's just more of a message board question for that one. But yeah, good stuff today, Trev. Thanks for indulging me on the first hour of the show. As you know, I needed to get a lot off my chest.
Understandably so.
And the only reason we talked about it, again, if he talks about Notre Dame, then I'm going to respond to it. If he doesn't want to be if he doesn't want to be talked about by Notre Dame people, then don't talk about Notre Dame. But he does. It's the whole point of what he said. So that's why we responded to it. I didn't let his stuff go when he was the coach. I'm not going to let it go when he's not the coach. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate all of you indulging me and allowing me to share my thoughts and opinions on that.
Folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. We will be back tomorrow afternoon for the midweek rundown. We're also going to be previewing BYU, one of Notre Dame's biggest opponents of the regular season, so not going to want to miss tomorrow's show. On your way out of this show, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And until next time, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.